Yeah.
I'm going to call to order the committee of the whole then, meeting 239, February 28th. And in honor of the Mi'kmaq, the village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. Those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Any amendments to the agenda? None. Motion is presented. Mr. Caddick, seconded by Mr. Ramsden. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes from committee of the whole 238 from February 7th. Approved by Mr. Ramsden, seconded by Councilor Nightingale. Any discussion? Opposed? Carries. We have two delegations. Section 4.1 is BC Ambulance. Mr. Clifford, Provincial President, Ambulance Paramedics of BC. Wait 7-3. Just wait for him to join.
There's a couple of other people from BC Ambulance that just want to check with him to see if he would like them to join as well.
Hi, can you hear me?
Can now. Good afternoon, Mr. Clifford. Thanks for joining us. Is there anybody else that is joining you in presenting?
Yeah, there should be two other people, Craig Chapman and Kelly Budway.
Yeah, we'll move them up onto the.
Yeah, we'll just take a sec to admit them. So give us a moment. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, they'll just join in. I'll primarily do their presentation and then we'll go from there.
Let's just get tech set up here. Let me know when you're good. We're good. All right, the table is yours.
Thank you very much. So time frame wise, just to make sure I'm not taking too much of your time and presentation wise.
We generally allow for about 10-minute presentation and then some time for Q&A afterwards.
Perfect. That sounds familiar. So that's what we'll do our best to keep it there. So I'll do a quick introduction and then I'll pass it off to my two colleagues that are joining us just for their quick background in that. And then I'll jump right into why we wanted to have a conversation with you folks. So again, thank you for having us. I'm Troy Clifford. I'm the provincial president with the Ambulance Paramedics and Dispatchers of BC, which is the provincial union and professional body that represents over 4,600 paramedics in BC. And I'll just quickly go over to Kelly now. She's got a couple roles here, but she's here in her role as with the APBC, but I'll let her tell her background.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Budway. I'm a regional vice president for the Ambulance Paramedics of BC. So I look after the Sea to Sky, Sunshine Coast, and all of Metro Vancouver. I also am the paramedic unit chief for Station 219 here in Pemberton, and I have been here since March. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you. And Craig, I'll get you to join in there.
Yeah, hello everyone. Craig Chapman. I've been with the paramedic service for over 25 years, mostly working on the east side of the province in the Kootenays. And great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So what I try and do is I've been meeting with the local leaders across the province, right from rural and remote and Indigenous communities to metro communities. And this is sort of an initiative we've taken on as part of our engagement of local governments and leaders. And you'll know that from UBCM we attend meetings, but probably met with over 150 local leader governments since over my two terms, but primarily over the last little while since UBCM and the challenges we've had in the last couple of years with the ambulance service and service delivery across the province. So what I try and do is obviously with Kelly's local expertise, and she's lived in the Sea to Skies Highway for quite some time, and I try and bring a couple of my colleagues just started to have more of a local connection, but also just I've been in the service 35 years and worked primarily all over the province, but I'm also a chief in the interior in Osoyoos, but I think the three of us are very versed in not only the challenges in rural and remote BC, which Pemberton sort of falls into that category. You have everything right from Indigenous, rural, really remote communities and areas you service, but also, in larger areas when you're there. And so we all bring that vast experience, I think, And that's why. So I'll primarily do the presentation, and then I'll ask my colleagues to jump in if they see me going off track, or if they have any, and I'll rely on Kelly for her local knowledge. I mean, I'm fairly familiar with the Valley, but I'll allow her to sort of correct me if I'm wrong on anything and add her perspective from a local perspective. But it's important to remember that although we all work as paramedics or dispatchers in BCHS, our primary role right now is with the ambulance paramedics, and that's where we've reached out to you for engagement in these conversations. So a couple of things. We represent over 4,600 paramedics and dispatchers across BC. So we're the traditional union that does all the representation, bargaining, all those I guess common and regular union roles. But in BC, we're a little unique. We have a dual role that we're very proud of, and we are also the professional body of the for paramedics and dispatchers. And what that means is that we're the BC chapter of the Paramedic Association Canada. So we wear dual hats in our role, and it's unique to BC because most organizations and most professions have two. They have a union, but they also have a professional represented body. We do both. It's unique to BC because that's the way it's always been, and it quite frankly works very well for us. So why that's important is that when we're engaging communities, that's where our members identify. Is that we that's why you see us meeting with local governments and advocating for patient care, advocating for service delivery, engagement of the local government to meet the service needs and that, but also advocating for patient care and scope of practice thing. So, and why we do that is because that's how our paramedics identify. That's what they want from us as a professional body and union, and it works very well for us. And at that, the other unique dual role that we have in BC is that we are the only profession that crosses two boundaries. We're identified as a health profession in our structure under the Ministry of Health, Provincial Health Services Authority, and ultimately BCHS, who are responsible for providing ambulance services in the province under the entity of BC Emergency Health Services within the Provincial Health Services Authority and Ministry of Health, obviously. But we're also designated as a public safety occupation. And what I mean by that is that federally we're designated under the CRA as a public safety occupation in line with our colleagues in police and fire and corrections and all those other disciplines that are designated as public safety occupations. So why that's all important is that we transition very smoothly on the street with our relationship with public safety. But as we transition clinically and move patients to the hospital, we are in line with our health partners. So it works very well. It gets complicated for people, and sometimes they want to put us in a pigeonhole as well either way. And we're very comfortable moving back and forth through those two responsibilities. And why that these two areas, I give that little bit extra blurb on where we're at is that a few of our challenges that you've seen, and probably I'm sure you're well aware of our service delivery challenges and our the things have been well documented in media. In June of 2021, we all lived the heat dome and struggled through what was the heat dome, and really that's where the ambulance service response and preparation was called into question. And tragically, we've seen over 700 people die in BC related to the heat dome. That was late June, early July of 2021. And what happened shortly after that, within 2 weeks, the public, the media, but the Ministry of Health questioned the BCS's lack of response and preparation. And why that date is important is that on July 14th, the Minister of Health made significant announcements on changing the ambulance service and enhancing it, both from an investment in full-time positions, but also from a restructuring and putting us under a single board, the BCHS new board, a governance model. But he also made a number of other announcements in there, improving full-time coverage for communities around the province, and also and advising the ambulance service and directing them that they needed to reestablish emergency management division, which had been away in the early 2010 when we were moved into the Provincial Health Services. So that's a lot of stuff. I should have told you that we'll be able to follow up with some presentations and background information that will help you give some back information on what we're talking about here. So all this stuff I've told you sounds really cool, and we know what the struggles are, and we know that there's been delays to ambulance services around the province, and people aren't getting an ambulance in a timely fashion. Particularly in communities that are growing like yours, or that are adjacent to really busy communities like Whistler. And as Kelly will probably articulate, what happens is these communities like Pemberton, when we can't staff because of our recruitment challenges in the province, are short-staffed. And then when you start getting pulled into the city with transfers, but also into Whistler when they're having spikes of calls, that leaves your community open. And it's a vast geographic area. And that affects patient outcomes and service delivery. And we haven't had high profile incidents, thankfully, in Pemberton, but we have not been without incidents that we've seen in Ashcroft and Barrier and Cusp most recently. It's happening every day across the province because of our significant out of service ambulances. So those are all the problems we have. But why do we want to talk to you, and why are we engaged in the municipality? So what I realized when a number of years ago was, and particularly when I came into this role as president, we hadn't done a very good job of engaging the local governments, and particularly around things like service delivery, lobby efforts, and how you can hold the provincial government, the Ministry of Health, and BC Ambulance Service accountable to make sure that every citizen in your community and their surrounding communities that are covered gets an ambulance in a timely fashion, because that has not been happening. And are you adequately resourced? And how do we push for this so that we can avoid downloading to the community? And obviously onto you're like probably every other community, I would assume that your taxes are challenged, and you're really you're not able to take on additional responsibilities that are not under the municipal mandate. So what I've been working with as many communities is how I can assist them. When I say I mean our team can assist you with, engaging the BC Ambulance Service and the Ministry of Health, and how we can make sure that Pemberton is adequately resourced and serviced for the needs of the community, and both currently and future. And then not only in making that, is making sure that the communities that you're surrounded by. So the Howe Sound has a significant inter-facility transfer challenges, and how we can make sure that those do not deplete our resources. And you may or may not know that we've recently, under the Rural and Remote and Indigenous Framework, added a transfer resource into Pemberton. That's a really good thing, but we do need to add full-time resources in the Pemberton and Howe Sound, Whistler and Howe Sound corridor. So those are the challenges. What we want to do is start a conversation that you know who you can contact in the ambulance permit, and we can assist you with the challenge we have. The other area that's important that we do, and we know this through our, and this was depleted when I was talking about emergency management, when we went into the Provincial Health Services Authority, they digressed us from our emergency management and preparedness side, our alliance with many of the municipalities, and training and working closely with our partners in police and fire and emergency management. And when we see these wildfires every summer, or heat domes, or flooding, or that you guys experience every year, we need to be better prepared and working with you. It's like the local chiefs used to be a key part of that EOC and emergency management and planning. That has went away, and that's one of the key things that the minister wanted BCHS to get back to, is the local government engagement for preparedness and planning. So those are the areas we can work to. And then another key area, the last one, is around community paramedic and our support for communities. And we haven't had the expansion of it the way it should. We need to get better working with the Indigenous community. And as you know, there's a lot of them around there. And the community paramedic will help us program helps us engage the community and defer calls and support in the community, working closely with community health and the local government. So I'll leave it at that, and then we'll go some questions. And I don't know if I'll go to Kelly first, and if Craig had anything to sort of supplement me or add. I know we're cognizant of time, but I think it's important to understand the context and what we want to do to work with you.
Sorry. In the Pemberton station, about 18 months ago, we went from 2 full-time employees and about 35 to 40 on-call staff to 8 full-time employees, which was a huge change, long overdue, very necessary. And even since then, as Troy mentioned, we've have in April, beginning of April, a 7-day-a-week transfer car working from noon to midnight. So that has attracted 5 more full-time positions. So we now at fully staffed, we would have approximately 15 full-time, about 25 on call, and there is 1 position for a 0.53 full-time equivalent for a regular part-time community paramedic. However, currently a lot of those are unstaffed. We have 10 full-time only currently out of a total of 15. So a big issue with this is housing here locally. It's hard to attract local people because until recently the pay has been not very desirable as well. Most of our on-call paramedics come from larger communities. They commute up for their blocks, and so they have nowhere to live up here. Many of them have looked at moving to the community, and unfortunately the housing here, as I'm sure you all know, is difficult at best. So that is one of our biggest issues right now. Another one is staffing the community paramedic position. It's been sitting vacant for almost, it's been about 1.5 years now. It's been sitting vacant. This is similar to community nursing position in that they go out into the community and deal with or visit patients who need home care, who need regular check-ins. And it was quite a worthwhile position to have in the community. Unfortunately, we have been unable to staff it. The 0.53 of full-time is not as desirable, obviously, as a 1.0. And it, again, is a problem with attracting someone local to work that position. So
before I go to Craig, those are excellent points. And these are key areas that we can work with you to make sure that, and this isn't questioning a lot of things. A lot of this stuff is a product of many years, and Kelly raises a good point that I never raised, and we've seen this with Revelstoke, Valemount, a lot of communities that have limited housing for workforce housing, and it's not unique to us. I met with the mayor, the superintendent, and all the sort of key players in Revelstoke, and the RCMP in that, and they're all challenged for that because it's a resort community with limited housing. Same in Valemount and that's where I think that there's an opportunity to work with local governments to try and make sure that we can, it's not just unique to the ambulance service, it's many of your recruitment challenges in a challenged province. So there's a number of areas that we'd really like to assist and work closely with you to see where we can help and work that. And having Kelly in your community with her experience in provincially and in these areas is key to having somebody to contact. I'm always available as well, and we'd love to follow up with this and have more engagement and meet in person. Unfortunately, it's snowing, so it's a good thing we did go virtual today, but it's snowing all over the province, and not so much worried about that for us that all drive in it, but it's a little bit of everybody else. So Craig, did you have anything to add before we let them ask us some questions if they have any?
No, I think Kelly and Troy did a great job of summarizing. So go to questions.
Thanks to all of you. And you've definitely identified some of the challenges that we have here. I appreciate that housing and recruitment is an issue across the board, different industries. And that's something that potentially we could work on together. I feel like a number of residents and my own personal feelings are that we appreciate the changes that were made about a year and a half ago. A lot of those on calls went to full time. It's been interesting to watch how that's affected call time and availability of paramedics. But there's still a general feeling that we are under-resourced in that we are resourced at a level that's more I guess, relevant or applicable to our population rather than the fact that on any given Saturday in July, our population goes from, 7,000 to 8,000 locally in the valley to hundreds of thousands of people coming through our corridor. And as a result, ambulances get pulled out predominantly on highway calls for folks traveling through the area, leaving our own residents vulnerable and exposed, as this is where most of the attention goes. So there's a feeling that the resource metrics that's used in terms of what Pemberton should get is more based on our population rather than the volume of people that come through our community, especially in the summer months. So that's something I would definitely be very motivated to work with you folks on to get that message across and look at further resource. And I know you're experiencing staffing issues. And you mentioned the transfer car and having that transfer, that additional resource is definitely helpful. The noon to midnight, that's definitely helpful. Nonetheless, it's still a really, really big problem for us that our ambulances and paramedics do a drive down to Vancouver, get transferred once, twice, three times. And for that whole period, we are left exposed and relying on our volunteer fire department to attend those calls at a cost to our taxpayers again, and again, at their risk. So, we're on limited time today, but I would like to follow up this meeting today with a conversation. You said at the outset, Mr. Clifford, that we could work together to approach the province on these issues. Those are, in my mind, are two of the biggest issues facing us here with regards to ambulance service. And I think we're all pretty motivated here to work on that together. So I'd like to understand what that could look like moving forward.
Absolutely. And we have a great experience. I just met with, I'm the chief in Osoyoos, and we have a lot of similar issues that you do when your population goes up, and we have the same coverage resources. And you're right. When you look at Matrix and say your population is this, and this is what you get for an ambulance service, there's so many other factors, and the community beside you is very busy and under-resourced too. So that impacts you guys. There's definitely some key areas we can work with you. I've assisted many communities across the province in these areas, and I commit, Kelly and I can definitely work with you guys, and the rest of our team will support us to engage the government and how we can hit those key points. Resourcing, it's under-resourced in your community, 100%. I can tell you, we need more full-time resources. We can't be relying on a precarious on-call mall. You're isolated geographic to get somebody in there is really challenging. So we can work on that as well. So definitely, the emergency or the workforce housing things, we can have some conversations. There's some models out there that work, and we can have those discussions. So it's definitely a follow-up conversation that we can set up and sort of strategize where we can work together and where we can hit you some key bullets to ask the right questions and hold the people that are responsible for the ambulance services. We've had some really good engagement from this provincial government, but also the BC Ambulance Service leadership. So they are willing to listen, but they've got challenges across the province from 20 or 30 years of failing to deal with resources. So many communities that that have been doing this have been getting a ear of the government, and they understand. Minister Dixon and his staff really understand the challenges. So I think it's not about blaming people. It's about how we can have some solutions that address making sure that everybody in every community that gets a timely ambulance in their time of need. So that's sort of where I'd like to work with you, and those key areas that you've identified. You obviously know the challenges. So I think that gives us a starting point for sure.
Excellent. I look forward to the follow-up then. Any questions? No questions at this time. Thank you very much to the three of you for joining us. And again, I think we all look forward to that follow-up conversation, how we could advocate effectively to get this property resource here. So thanks for your time. We'll talk soon.
Thank you very much. And we'll reach out and I'll send you some additional information on community paramedic or resourcing and that, and then we'll engage through your staff to set up a meeting to follow up.
Awesome. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Okay, 4.2. Meeting with our airport lease holders. You guys, join us up here. We'll grab you on the chair. Anybody else coming? We should only need one chair. Actually, we're good. Richard?
I can stay.
I don't like looking at my secret message on my shoulder.
We're just gonna bring Canvas too.
Yeah.
Into other panels. Send it.
We're just gonna allow a couple, have a seat. We're just gonna allow a couple people to join remotely here before we get going.
Just one person.
Yeah.
But I do have a handout if that's permitted.
Sorry. Sure.
Thank you.
Everybody connected that's tried to connect here? Yeah, good. Okay, so thanks to the three of you and anybody else that's joined us online and turn the floor over to you guys.
Okay, well, thanks very much, and thanks very much to all of you for having us here. I'd just like to mention before we start that your comment about being on unceded Lil'wat land, I think it's very important to discuss that what we're going to be talking about today is also unceded Lil'wat land, and we fly over unceded Lil'wat land, and we feel that Lil'wat should have a seat at the table when we discuss these things going forward. The community right now is involved in something called the official community plan. There's lots of dinner table conversations going on, working on your official community plan. And I've attended one of those, and I thought that was a tremendous format to try to talk to you guys today. So rather than an official community plan, this is the UEAP, which is the unofficial East Airport plan. Okay, and then so it's at the dinner table, it's being suggested that they use the format of now, wow, and how, which is very similar to actually a lot of things that we do in medicine, but I'd say now is what the situation is. Wow is 2050 in the official community plan, but we're looking maybe 10 or 15 years down the road and how to get there. I'm going to talk for about a minute and then Greg's and I'm going to turn this over to Greg. This is Tracy Brother-Pellick, who's a hangar owner also at the airport, but her hangar's not in the East Airport part that we're talking about. As it stands right now, there's kind of a quadrant. We see that's probably where all of the development in the airport is going to probably take place during the next decades. We have an access road and an old gate. If we head down the access road, it's bounded on one side by search and rescue and by the sewage treatment plant on the other side. We head down that, about 2/3 of the way down that, there's a rudimentary road goes to the east that cuts behind a couple of the lots that may be able to be used down the road. On the right-hand side and the west side is the big pole farm that Blackcomb Helicopters has created to do their hydro pole training. If we get out onto the east taxiway and head towards the west, that's about 200 meters or so to the end of that. There's one small hangar and then several lots that haven't been developed yet, and then our hangar, and there'll be by a year and a half, I think, another hangar a little bit bigger than ours built adjacent to ours. So that's how it is right now. We don't have hydro there, we don't have water there, we have some limited access issues there. So that's the now, that's how we're going. I'm just going to turn it over to Greg.
Thank you. My name is Greg Sorensen. So Hugh is my business partner and we've got along the East Taxiway. And we've built that for general recreational aircraft, not commercial jets or things like that, just for small aircraft like a little Cessna that we might fly. We've built that and we've had it a lot now. This is the start of our 3rd year. And we can see that there are a number of items that we would like to move forward on. So that way, 10 years from now, we're not sort of kicking ourselves saying we should have discussed that back in the day to get things rolling. And none of these points I want to talk about, there's only 4, are showstoppers. I think they're all manageable. It's just, I just like to bring them up with you guys as council members and see if we can find some solutions. Maybe just start there at the big top. For us, one of the killers for us right now is there's no BC Hydro power. We use a generator when we want to get the lights going, but otherwise it's a solar panel that charges the battery that raises and lowers our bifold door. Having electricity out there would do amazing things, everything from alarm systems, smoke detectors, having a light on 24/7 inside. Right now you turn the generator off and it's pitch black. It's one of those things that we would love to have. A number of the other lot owners or leaseholders, I guess, along the East Taxiway also would like to bring in power. And we're at the point where we know it's not really within the village's budget to pay for that. So we're wanting to maybe proceed by paying for it ourselves. When we talk to BC Hydro, there's 2 parts. First is the engineering study. And if the engineering study is positive, that money goes towards the actual build cost. We're willing to fund that and the build cost, but we don't want to be stuck with paying for an engineering study that then gets sort of bogged down at sort of the village level eventually, because at some point there's going to have to be right-of-way agreements that I'm assuming somewhere here in the village, someone signs every time a telephone line gets to be put in or a BC Hydro line gets put in. Somewhere there must be someone signing these easements or these agreements. So those type of things would have to occur before the build proceeds. So on this first point, we just want to say there's an interest from our group to do this and pay for it, but we want to make sure everybody's on board. So, you know, so we're not out, say the study was 5,000 or 10,000. We don't want that just to go up in smoke. We want to make sure it's actually going to be used and we don't get stuck with not having service, even though we paid for the study. And that's something that you guys can certainly think about or follow up with us, you know, for more detail, but I just wanted to raise it today. I could keep proceeding and then we can do questions at the end or.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go through your presentation.
The next one was in a similar vein, services. We knew from the get-go, there was going to be no water, there's going to be no hydros and other services. But when we talk to others that are on the East Taxiway, the first lot, sort of in the modern era of the airport, was 2015. And since then, there's been 3 others, including us. And then most recently, there's the lot 11 that's gone in right beside us or is going in beside us. We haven't really seen, or at least it's not visible to us, any development or planning in the long term for what could be occurring. You know, if there's going to be fire hydrants down the road, you know, between that first person in 2015 and now, unless it hasn't, maybe it's been done, but we're not seeing it. So we want to see if we can start making progress. So 8 years again in the future, we have something on paper that we've maybe met, we've planned and said, okay, these are where the sewer lines are going to go. These are where the drainage is going to go to, or the next taxiway is going to go, because 4 more lots and our taxiway is going to be full. So the next one has to be planned for. Services, to get that second taxiway done, it really depends on what we're doing right now today. So I just think it's an area that if we don't at least create that timeline of when are we going to do things, you know, we don't have to put money towards it today, but we might say, look, 8 years from now, we want to have fire hydrants. So when do we start budgeting for that? When do we start getting some grants happening or plans happening or lobbying people? So that's sort of the thrust of question 2. Question 3, again, this is related. There's a long time ago, there was an airport user group, and this was People that were interested in flying in aviation. This was people that had leases. This was commercial operators. They would meet once in a while, and I think there's very much a desire for all those people to meet again with the village. There's so many things that this group is enthusiastic about that wants to help guide the village. Unlike a lot of other places, all of us out there are out there because this isn't just a business, well, it's particularly for Hugh and me, for Hugh and I, this is a sort of a passion that we're sinking our own personal money into. And we want it to be successful, and we can only do that with the help of the village, whether it be council staff, with the other users that are out there. We've got lots of ideas, it's just sometimes the communication doesn't seem to always be there. So like even right now with the way you guys are meeting, it would be great if we could meet like this, but with all the users once or twice a year. To talk about the problems at the airport. The trees that maybe need to be trimmed because they're now getting too high. The alignment of the runway number, it's now being too far off magnetically. Maybe, a fence that's damaged or this or that, because a lot of times this information doesn't seem to, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to get to, yes, maybe, or to you as a group. I'm just wondering if we could revisit the idea of doing a more formal airport user group meeting. Besides the leased lots, there's the Starbase, there's the trailer that was for the dog daycare, there's Blackcomb Aviation, there's Pemberton Soaring, there's the golf course. All these people surround this large chunk of land, and we all have sort of a component that's involved in how we all work together. The last one here, this is sort of, I think sounds a bit of a bossy statement, but physical access. We all have lease contracts, and we all know that in the lease, there's discussion of snow clearing, and people get all their frustrated with snow clearing. But the lease is really dealing with the day-to-day operations of the airport. What I'm trying to address here is we have a lot that we need access to, totally separate from whether or not the runway is clear, the taxiway is clear, the apron is clear. If I have, like I live on Balsam Street, when I live on Balsam Street, if they're digging a big snow, I know the snow truck's gonna come by and plow. But similarly, the lease lot we have, especially last year, and it's a lot better this year, we're not necessarily guaranteed that anyone's going to plow that, so we have access. So, I know we can't fly because the airport runway it's got snow on it, but we can still do stuff at the lot. And this is where it's a bit of frustration, because we think, well, we're paying the lease cost, we're paying the commercial property tax, but we're not getting the timely clearing to the lot. The city vehicles are out there clearing the apron and other areas, but it only takes an extra few minutes to come by and just do a little path right in front of us so we can get to our lot. If there's a fire, if there's another emergency, there has to be a way for those emergency vehicles to get to us. So that's sort of the thrust of the last one. On the next page, I just did a little, this was just sort of a freehand sketch of where the BC Hydro, when we first talked to them, they said, yeah, that looks totally doable. Let's do it up now as an engineering plan. So that's was the idea of coming off the main line along Airport Road. And it's hard to see down there, but there's a little spot that says lot 10, that's us. And the just to the east of us, there's now lot 11. And again, this issue for power and I guess for the access really only affects us up on the East Taxiway. All the other lots being Blackcomb Aviation, Star, Pemberton Soaring, because they're located along the main highway, they get plowed anyway. They have power anyway. But for all all this future development of us out there in the sort of the woodsy area, we're kind of on our own. And that's why I'm kind of pitching this today. The last page, I've sort of done it up in that format of, now. But it's one of those things that if we start today and we make that initial plan, that little initial investment in time and say, hey, let's meet, June 15th, and we're going to look at timelining the next 10 years. Where do we want to be? Because we still don't fully know, does the village even want to invest time or resources in the airport? We're investing our time and resources, but we don't have a feel for what the village's long-term strategy is. So these are things that if we can all, I think would be very helpful. Any kind of questions on that? I've glossed over a lot here.
There's a lot to cover for sure. Any questions? Let's go.
Yeah, thanks very much for the presentation. What kind of time frame would you look at as far as setting up a airport user group? That's something over the years that I was hoping to see long before now, so that we can maybe take some of these issues off of our table and have the airport users get together on yourself and then bring those issues forward. What would you maybe consider as a time frame for that?
Well, it actually already exists. There's two user groups out there that shouldn't be confused with each other. One is the flying club, which is all the people that are flying out there, and the other is actual owners. And we've met one time and discussed some of our user group issues. We would really like that to be the communication tool to have input from airport users into this process. The reason that I looked at it is now how and wow is basically the how part is the feedback loop. It's what you guys do is you meet. And if you meet and talk, that the how is the planning part, but you also have a meeting every once in a while to provide feedback to make sure you're on track, to take into account other stuff going on. We feel that we are in a position as airport users out there really frequently to provide some of that input back to council in a joint way, feel like that we're being listened to a bit and provide input, not as the only, not what we say goes, but because we are in a position to provide a lot of information back. And I think that's how I would see this process going forward and staying on track. So coming up with a plan, which Greg's mentioned, whether it's power or whatever, that we need to get those things in place. Eventually they will happen. We can assign timelines to them and then work on the how to get there. And very often it's, part of the situation is this, is that you guys are, this is a subdivision and you guys are the developer of the subdivision. There's 30 potential lots out there that are going to be revenue generating lots. Our commitment this year to the village is about $7,000, about $3,000 for our lease costs and about $4,000 for our property tax. So we'll be contributing. If we multiply that by 10 along the front there, that's going to be close, as time goes by, close to $100,000. And 3 deep, that's going to be close to $300,000 that can come to the village. So with the development of that, if you put on your developer hat for a minute, what does development means? Well, it means a vision, and then, which is what we're talking about today. It means planning, which is really the big important part. And then it means putting that plan into place with surveying and so on. And that's what we'd really like to see, because I think that just like, a run of river project or a tree farm or something else that might contribute revenue dollars to the village, that the airports can be self-sustaining. We shouldn't be putting up barriers to prevent it from developing. We should be working really hard to try to get it to develop, because, I got to tell you that in this last month, I've had 2 completely separate groups come to me and want to build out at the airport. How do we build out at the airport? Do you guys have any room left in your hangar? No. what are you gonna do? Build their own hangar. And so part of what I'm trying to do is put those guys together so they can come up with a plan to build either hangars like ours that are for 4 planes or for bigger planes. And they've got the dollars behind them to do it. They just need to sort of get a sense that, yeah, we're full on here in this community, that we're pro airport, that we're going to try to make these things happen and not erect a bunch of barriers in the way to prevent that from happening. So, I feel like, yeah, the airport's not even part of the official community plan, and yet it's a jewel in your crown out there. It could be potentially a big part of it. It's not part of your snow plowing plan for the village. It's just kind of an afterthought, and I don't think it needs to be that. I really think that it could be, not very many communities have got a 4,000-foot airport. Your previous discussion was with a guy who's emergency, and you've got an airport that can handle emergencies out there, whether it's fire or whether they're smaller emergencies that can handle bigger aircraft. And we need to make sure that we make that sustainable.
Ted, I might just add here that the airport user group pretty much exists already. It's just the key person that's missing is you guys. Like every time we meet or I meet with another owner out there and when I'm talking to them, it's the same conversation over and over again, because we're powerless to do the next steps without you guys, or discuss the next steps without you guys. And that's why I think having, or maybe if it's one counselor, one staff, and 2 guys, on that Zoom and meeting with us, I think that's just so critical for us to take this to the next level.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think meeting with the airport user group is a key to next steps, because I think we definitely need to get on the same page as things. Because I think you're right. Planning is how you get stuff done. If we don't plan for it, if we don't think about the future, it's not going to happen. So whether it's 5 years, 20 years, or 50 years, I think it's important to consider the future, the services that we might want, and how we want to see the airport go. And also that meeting would help communicate, because the airport isn't an afterthought. The airport is a function within the village that we manage with our very tiny staff at this small table, amongst others. And we have to consider all of that in a package. So, when you add up the money and go, well, X amount of users times X amount of dollars, the math isn't so simple. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't say, oh, we got $80,000 here to use towards snow clearing now. The math doesn't quite work that way. We have to cover all services. And I think it's important for the airport users to know clearly that at this point in time, the residents of Pemberton supplement the funding for the airport. So I agree with you. Maybe there is a way that it could be self-sustaining. I'd love to see that. I think everybody would. And let's try to plan for it, and let's look towards that. We have, and again, to communicate some of the things that we have done, which obviously we need to be talking about, in that we have looked, since I've been sitting here over a number of years, a couple of different options to how can we make it more lucrative, how can we make it more high service, those sorts of things. So some of those conversations have happened that we need to fill you in on so that you're aware. But it's a tough situation in that, again, right now, what we collect from leaseholders does not cover the time and resources that we put into the airport. I agree. It's an asset we want to protect. Not every small community has one like that. We want to protect it. It's also challenged by a landslide hazard or risk assessment, which we all know what that looks like, and has made things even more challenging in terms of planning for the future and how much taxpayer money do we invest in it. So I think you're right. I think having a broader conversation on a more regular basis, so that we understand your hopes and aspirations out there as our leaseholders, and you understand our challenges in terms of how we want to proceed. So I think the idea of a regular meeting is whatever that looks like. I think it's great. And I think, like I say, like you say, planning for the future. Let's start looking at what hydro could look like, what some of those things could look like. And I think it would be great because it would allow all the users again to understand some of the challenges that we have and work towards a solution to go, you know, you said it, we're willing to cover the hydro cost. Okay, so how do we make that happen? Some costs are nonetheless borne by the village, and how do we manage that? And, you know, so that's all part of the greater conversation. And I think we need to understand each other's reality. It would give us better understanding of each other's reality out here. Again, ours is at this point a fact that the airport, I believe, is a very, very important asset to this valley, not just to the village. And we need to understand where it fits in the future, whether it's emergency, whether it's recreational use or commercial potential. Again, the commercial potential has been sort of swallowed up by the Mount Currie risks over the years, but let's understand what those potentials are and what the challenges are, because it has been a struggle. As the leases, we want to provide snow clearing where we can. We want to provide what we can, but we are very limited. You know, it's not insignificant dollars. We always use the example. We raise taxes by 1%. We bring in 20 grand. 20 grand from by everybody's taxes going on 1%. So when we look at how much we can invest everywhere in the village, that is always not in the back of our heads, the front of our heads as we look at it. So I think getting together and understanding each other's challenges and how we could build towards the future is a great idea. So I had a couple notes here. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of at the heart of it is basically understanding, and this is a really great starting point, what you see as the wow, what you see as the future. Let's start working with this and come up with a plan how we can work together to sort of develop a vision for the airport and how we can get there. And we can sort of break it down with you folks and go, well, if you want A, you're gonna have to pay for it. How can we support you on it?
So
Sort of the conversation.
So again, if we ask you to put a developer hat on, when a developer would go in and develop a subdivision, they put stuff in place so that builders or potential buyers could come along. We think sort of in a linear way, but you guys are in a position to think laterally, and you see lots of other stuff going on. One example of that, and the easiest part in a way about our build, was getting the fill on the land. We needed permission from the Lillooet Nation to go ahead and then contracted a local guy who was actually clearing gravel out of the river, looking for a place to put it, and he put it on our lot. So one of the things that could happen was that could just become a reservoir or a place that a lot of gravel could be stored. Instead of trucking it here and then trucking it again and trucking it again around, which is what we had to end up doing and paying, that's basically the fill's free and that you just pay for trucking. If you do it once, it just makes a whole lot of sense to me. So getting some of that, I mean, you're just right beside where the gravel's being dredged out of the river. So what I'm saying is that these are things that you guys are kind of in a position to look at and go, yeah, we can use this to do this, and it's not going to really cost anything. And then any costs associated with that can become a development cost charge you hand on to the next guy, and they're just going to be more likely to be ready to go. So when I tell people, yeah, you need to do $45,000 worth of fill, they go, oh, that's not something that's usually the case when you put up a hangar. And so they go, but we really are in a position here. Squamish is kind of maxed out. There's so many better reasons to build in Pemberton than there is in Squamish. It's not going to happen in Lillooet. We're a bit challenged in January and February because of weather, but other than that, it's just a great place to fly and have to keep your planes and keep playing businesses.
No, I hear you. And again, I think that's why it's important to have this meeting, because what you just brought up has been discussed here at this table, and we need to communicate that too. So it's not, the perception understandably is, hey, we're pulling gravel out of the river every year. Gravel doesn't belong to us. It's part of the deal. When it's extracted, it belongs to the extractor. We do it for flood protection. But having said that, we have conversations about how can we use it? How can we get access to it?
But even if it was like the next lot, you know, just.
But my point is the gravel isn't ours to take. I know it comes out of our river, but it's not ours to take. So this is where, again, this is a fruitful conversation where we can have as a group so that you understand that it's not. We need to make it clear for you so we can come up with a plan that it's not as simple as, hey, there's river gravel coming out of here. It doesn't belong to us. And we asked about it. We've asked about it for other, you know, we've looked at it for diking purposes around our critical infrastructure like sewage plant. We've looked at it for recreation purposes. We want, you know, I hear you, but it's not ours to just take. And so we need to communicate that and come up with a plan.
When we approached them last year to fill our lot, they gave us the gravel. And then we just paid for trucking. And I think the contract with them does the contract, the cost of that is being borne by the province, I think, right?
No, a good chunk of it's being borne by you diking.
By diking.
By diking and.
Yeah. Anyway, I was just these sort of ideas, I think, you're in a position to look at them and go, okay, hydro, what are some of the things that could happen there? We see huge poles there already. We see the poles aren't really the issue. We see power already within about 100 yards of where the East Taxiway is, and yet we can't get power to where we are. And so, but you know, things have to happen in order. That makes no sense to put fill in a road in and then dig it up to put your power in after it. So if these things are all kind of thought out ahead of time, I'm sure that, and then have feedback meetings, user group meetings a couple times a year or something. And so just asking that, who can we go to in council to head that up so that we can make.
I think at this point, what I anticipate is a follow-up to this conversation will sound like, okay, how do we come up with some regular communication with the users or user group, or we want to label you all east and west. You guys got to get along. So what does that look like, and how can we? Because again, I'm in full agreement with you that planning ahead, let's do it. Let's not put gravel and then dig it up with all that stuff. I'm in full agreement. We need to first, I think, come up with a forum for that meeting so that that information can get exchanged both ways. So again, we understand each other's wants and challenges. And then we can start to look at, you know, how do we plan for what are the priorities? Where, you know, I'm assuming that these are sort of listed in priority order. Or...
The main one there, the power, was because we were thinking of if the stars aligned, have this in place by the fall.
Okay. So yeah, that's, you know, you guys have already started the prioritization process. That's great. So we understand, we can have this meeting, understand your priorities. We can let you know what we're able to do with our current workload and financing, and then we can come up with a plan how to keep moving forward. I'm totally, I think everybody.
Can we add snow clearing equipment to that list?
Pardon me?
I said, can we add snow clearing equipment to that?
You know, we can add something. So all the like that's
On that, she and I have had a conversation about trying to use provincial and federal grants towards applying for getting some snow clearing equipment, because it was my understanding that there were some dollars out there. So we've had that conversation. It doesn't appear that we're eligible for much in the way, so we need to go a step further. We don't feel that, you know, a $100,000 piece of equipment that cost should be borne by the village. So I think that we're looking at smaller ways of doing that get us to where we want to be. You know, again, our issue mostly is just access to the East Taxiway, and even if the runway was clear, there's been tons of days during January and February that we couldn't fly anyway because the cloud base is so low. There's just not the ability to do it. So we know that we're challenged that way during the year, but just getting, you know, the existing machine run in and out and you're done. That would get us there. You know, the little piece of equipment that we bought seems adequate to clear, but it's just really slow out of the snow load. But we could have 2 or 3 times that much snow, and then we would be nowhere we're trying to do it that way. But You know, I think that again, at the user group meeting, we should talk about that. You know, what is the solution? Are there dollars that we can apply for as a user group that the village can apply for? Is there other ways of doing this? You know, Whistler Blackcomb Foundation or something. I mean, I don't know. But
No, and I think that would be, again, the meeting would be a useful next step for flushing some of these things out. Sorry, Councillor Ramsey, go ahead.
Well, just to kind of echo what was said is that, what and I recognize I'm fairly new to the table, but what I'm hearing from you guys is that, you know, some frustration and also like a lot of ideas. And at the end of the day, you guys are the ones who are out there on the property. You know, you're going to see things, you've got ideas. And I think looking at all this, it's kind of, I think, the first step though, because as Richmond pointed out, I mean, there's so many, like you had said, there's so many other things that we also have to look at. So I think, you know, if we start with this idea of getting together for a meeting, however that's structured, so at least we can have that flow of communication. And in that way too, you know, we can, you know, we're not able to make a decision here, but, you know, if you come to, you know, to us right now with a certain idea about, you know, this is how we do with Bill or something like that, we can't make a decision. I don't think we can make a decision at this group, but having that user group will ideally allow for better flow of communication, and so that, you know, you can recognize that your concerns are being heard. It also allows us to process the information, ideally maybe in a more concise way, because it means, you know, the information that's coming out of that is, you know, it's information and ideas that are coming from the entire user group out at the airport. I think, so I really do support the idea that kind of maybe the next step is just to go with the meeting. And I understand there's a lot of specifics to be discussed, but I think at this point that their step.
No, I think we all really appreciate the conversation here, honestly, and paying lip service. I think we appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the tone. And I think what we need to do is discuss, you know, what that meeting looks like and how we set it up, and that would be our next step. And then we can start flushing out one at a time again, what your priorities are and how we as a village can support it, what you guys might have to take on your own, what that looks like. But that's an item by item, you know, like this list plus more, I'm assuming. So yeah, I think as Councillor Ramsey said, I think that's the obvious next step. I appreciate what you brought forward. Allow us to go away now and come up with the right format for that meeting. Get back to you.
There were a lot of other people that were aware we were meeting today, but we were saying to most of them that our issues we were bringing up were really centered on our lot and the East Taxiway. Like our issues are unique compared to, say, Tracy's or Blackcomb Aviation's, or, you know, this is where the scope of all of the issues will expand once you have all the players here.
I would really recommend that you get together as a group before this meeting.
absolutely.
And come together on the same page as to what your priorities are as a group for the whole of the airport. Because if we sit down and we have however many different users with however many different hopes and dreams, we're not going to get anywhere. So you guys need to organize yourselves as well so that we can have a functional meeting.
Yeah, like there'd be a top 4 or 5 issues.
Exactly, but
To tackle and, you know.
Can we sort of think of the agenda of that first meeting as a long-term planning meeting?
sure, we can,
Coming up with some of these kind of, where are we going?
I would say we can commit that we will talk to you about what that agenda looks like.
Yeah.
So that you can inform what that agenda looks like.
Sure, excellent.
Johanna?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Richmond. What I appreciate is I like the comparison to the OCP, and I really appreciate the long-term vision, because we talk so much about how this community is changing and growing, and it is a little gem, the airport. And the only way we're gonna reach that vision and all the possibilities of that vision is by working together collaboratively and not in isolation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's one other thing that sometimes is lost within the discussion at the airport, because we have such a small budget out there that it looks like there's not much coming in. I've always brought up the fact that just take Blackcomb helicopters that 27 full-time staff. And Tracy's building that's leased out has got people that work there. So if we add all that together and look at the economic asset to the community, it's in the millions of dollars right now. And to follow up on what you said, Doc, is if there's further development through a plan, that could increase.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes what we get out of the airport right now is huge compared to what other small airports get, just with the staffing of that.
Well, I just, very briefly go, COPA, which is the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association, looks at these issues for small communities. We're not unique at all with that kind of discussion. Communities, airports of this size used about as much as this one to generate between $7 and $10 million when they look at all of the benefits that come out of the airport. And so, COPA is totally interested in providing that kind of information. They've got pamphlets on it, presentations on it, and so on. So, at some point, the BC delegate for that organization is from Squamish, or we can maybe have them at a meeting or something. Talk about the benefits that accrue to a community from having a little airport. And I think that would be great. Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
It's good. I feel that was productive. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you for this.
Thank you very much.
Let's say that. Take care. Okay.
Oh, now we got a short session. I can have lunch.
Yeah, go for it. That brings us to our budget session, 5.1, budget session number 2. Yeah. Hey, that's my coffee you're drinking. It's not hot.
Just before we move on.
Sure.
Now that we've got into that airport, we've had the training and the presentation, and you've rightly said, get your group together and that. What do we see as a time frame for this? I know that time together. I guess what I look at is getting the hydro in the past. Six month out kind of thing.
That's a pretty ambitious timeline for hydro.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, just for them to do the study.
My thought was that, because I was thinking about it as we were winding down, going to the portion to direct. My thought was leave it with staff. To sort of formulate talk about what it looks like for staff to set up a meeting with themselves and the user group and bring it down.
We've had discussion around power already, and I know that one leaseholder is wanting to initiate that. When we talked about it in 2016, 2017, I think it was, getting power out there. We just need the transformer and then identifying where the lines will come down the East Taxiway Access Road and then go underground. So at that time, it was about a $60,000 to $80,000 project. But we would be going it on our own at that time. We've always indicated to all the leaseholders out there, if they want to get power, that there's certainly an opportunity to do that if they are willing to do that work and pay that money. And then we would do a latecomers type of agreement so that anybody coming in later would pay their portion of it. So that is something that's been on the table for the airport, that group to initiate whenever they're ready to, and we would absolutely 100% support it. We right-of-way agreements, whatever, can be easily dealt with. For water and sewer, we had a full infrastructure proposal done. It was in the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars because you need a lift station. You can't do gravity feed. And that was the challenges with the water and sewer to that area of the airport. But we have our engineers did a preliminary study, Class D estimates, a number of years ago, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I mean, there's been work that's been done in that area to get servicing out there and what that might look like.
So it sounds like, I didn't want to put you guys on the spot by saying, how long would it take you? What do you need to do to have that kind of meeting? I didn't want to ask that, but it sounds like you've already got a lot of the homework done.
It's a bit outdated
It's
information,
outdated, so my
but
question is, to have the kind of vision forming meeting that they want to talk about, and again, I hope they caught that message, that they align themselves in terms of what they want. To set up that meeting with the user group and staff, and to go through, let's say, these 4 items to start, or whatever priority they come up with in the current context and capacity.
well, I think that's something.
And that's why I didn't want to put it as a motion, that's why I wanted to leave it in here, so that's settle for a sec, but.
I think, you know, I definitely, could see, pursuing something similar to what happened today in terms of them, you know, establishing what they want as a group and being able to come maybe once a year or twice a year and even visit committee of the whole, because I think that having that then helps you all as you go through your decision making inform that. Yeah, we did have a meeting like that back in November to go over to hear some of their needs, but also to talk about the current state of snow clearing, details around the leases and the snow clearing policy that was rolled out.
And I know some of this is covered.
Yeah, and so we did go over some of this at that time, but it you know, perhaps we needed a better mechanism in place to connect their requests, wants, and needs with the places where council has influence in terms of policy decision making.
In my, first of all, in my mind, this is a staff meeting at this point. If they want to do a regular cow like this, I'm okay with that too. But user group in terms of the dealing with the developers, as they call it, that's a staff.
Yes.
And that's why I didn't want to put you on the spot, because I know some conversations had, some are coming. But what I would like to see personally is that we respond and say, okay, we can have a meeting that looks like the following, and give you guys a chance to come up with what that looks like. I don't want to put you on the spot now, but I'm saying, I think the follow-up, I've got you, Laura, I've got Councilor Kanick, and I got Councilor Ramsden. I think the follow-up is, is that, hey, we're gonna have the meeting as requested, partly vision, share your priorities with us. You guys, staff, can share what that might look like for them. This is the work we've already done on hydro. We can follow it up, follow da. So I would think the next step would be for staff to decide what that meeting looks like for you and when, and then present that option to user groups so that they can prepare themselves for it.
I can also advise that they are one of the community groups on the list for the OCP.
Yeah, I was surprised when they said, I didn't want to.
It is in the OCP. Yeah, it is in the OCP, and the airport is the user group. I've confirmed with Mr. Brown. The user group is one of those groups that will have a session, an engagement session. So.
Yeah, just to follow up on my original question, what I've heard from Ms. Fraser now is the right-of-way agreements and stuff can be put into place. You said that that's not a problem.
If there's right-of-way agreements that need to actually be established, it would probably be between Hydro and the village. That those we do them all the time. It's not a complicated process.
So then, under their number one issue and talking with them previously, if they had that support now and knew they had that support and right-of-way agreements were okay, why can't we advise them of that now so they can go ahead and get their electrical study started?
We can certainly do that. I think it would probably be best for us to probably have a meeting with them to talk about what it is they're wanting to do and have Hydro or whatever. I mean, we should probably have operations at the table, and I wouldn't want to go and say today, oh, start your study. I think there needs to be a bit of a conversation just about what that's going to look like and what they're planning, what they want to do in terms of Hydro.
Right, but I think to give them the opportunity to know that we're willing to support them on that,
which we
would get them to the next point.
Yeah, which we've always told them that we were supporting.
Well, that's what we told the old groups, but we've got some new people here that want to be the spearhead, and I think we should send them something in writing so they've got that saying, we will support you, so they can move on that. That's all. Thank you.
At least meet on, or maybe if that is the highest priority in the short term, perhaps that's a meeting on its own as opposed to the whole airport user group meeting. You
And
know,
they
if they want to make that a priority, the priority. then
I think for this year it is, and they're willing to pay for it. So that's, but
They're looking for commitment on it.
they're committing on the right of way so they can pay for the study, which could be 15,000 up to that. So if they could get that started.
Perhaps that could be offered as part of the follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. That's great.
Well, I was just wondering though, because when I was looking at this, there's, I guess what I was trying to say is that the airport user group, it sounded like that was kind of a mechanism of better communication between council and village, whether that's council and staff and this group. Which is not meant to any comment about the communication that's gone on to now, but a lot of this other stuff kind of sounds like a higher level plan, and I appreciate that they have a lot of ideas about what to do. I understand that we have done some previous work, but I'm just wondering that's the Village of Pemberton asset. So I just wonder in terms of like them coming forward and saying this is what we want to do with it, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I would think from a governance level, we would also want to be part of that conversation because they clearly have some ideas about how it should be developed, which is great. And I would assume that, at the end of the day, they're the ones who are there every single day. They'll probably have a lot of great ideas, but I would be hesitant to, and I don't know if this is what's happening, but just kind of saying, it kind of let them completely steer it. I would think that would be something that we want to do. And I understand that it's part of the official community plan, and maybe that's kind of trying to work with them a bit more on that. But yeah.
So the village in the past has had some significant planning sessions around the airport. And a number of years ago, we engaged a consultant who came in and helped support that planning session where we met with the airport users, we met with the neighbors along Airport Road and had a lot of conversation around what do we see this airport looking like? Where do you want to see it develop? That's actually how we ended up with the sort of concept plan for the lease lots along the east taxiways through that process. So we haven't done a planning session around the airport, like just specific to the airport in terms of concept plans and what we could see and where it could go. While it could be part of the OCP is sort of a bigger picture is the OCP happens and then you develop your concept plan. It might be something that council might want to consider budgeting for in going forward is bringing in an airport development consultant to help sort of build that. We at the staff level don't have the expertise around airport development. We know we've seen a lot of different proposals come forward, but there are people out there in the industry who will come in and help support a local government or an organization that runs an airport to sort of come up with a plan that says, here's what you're going to do, and this is the timeline you do it in. And that's something that we haven't had with the airport for quite a while. So that might be something that council wants to consider doing. I don't know how it could possibly be done this year, but going forward to have an actual where you look at it all and you say, okay, this is where we're going to develop. This is where we would not develop. This is what we would plan in terms of taxiways or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think that this is a 50,000 feet, like the airport, it really is a gem in this community and it's so unique. And if we're gonna start getting into any kind of 50,000 foot planning, a consultant is good, but I think there's so many people in this community as well that I know the Agri Park, there was talk about putting something out there. Like there's so many different people in the community that have an interest and a care and a love for the community as a whole, that bringing all those people together along with the user group, the people at the airport would be very, very valid. And I'm always I like the idea of a consultant, but I'm also skeptical of bringing people from the outside in sometimes until as a community, we've actually looked at the airport and thought about I'm just saying, I'm not saying, I'm not opposed to
They-
consultants, I'm just,
More on the operational side.
right, no, I,
We don't, I mean, we have some element of ability to understand airport operations, but that's where the consultant kind of can help, you know, like where on the airport do you put things that end up not being conflicting with something else that's happening and that kind of thing. So it's looking at it from an operational standpoint. How does the airport develop operationally? That's a bit different than the bigger picture of what we see the airport being.
yeah, I mean, I think they're both important, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much. And just the last item, and I appreciate you let us going on to this a little bit. I'm trying to phrase this so I don't upset anybody. The road, the access road to their hangars. Is that not considered a road in our community so that it would be plowed on a regular basis? It sounds to me like that road isn't serviced at all, and I'm just, you know, from what they said, they can't access their site because that road doesn't get cleared. What does it take for us to include that in our? You know, I mean, they got facilities, but they can't get to them. What's the purpose? So how does that become part of our snow clearing process? Like he says, they're out at the airport cleaning the apron and stuff, but they can't get out on their own road. How does that become part of that?
I believe that would have to be, yeah, Tom would be more the expert on that, but we would have to incorporate that as part of our formalized snow clearing plan, but it's not, my understanding it's an official, is it an official road? No, it's not, yeah.
Question of the right of way.
Yeah.
It's an access, it's like a driveway on our property, well, it's not our property.
Well, it is our.
Well, here, and it is included in the airport snow removal policy, and we do clear it. So that's not simply not true, that it's not cleared. There's cases where it doesn't get cleared until we have the resources to do it. But it does get cleared. And it's included in the policy, with your airport snow clearing policy.
So it's in the airport snow clearing policy, so if it snows a couple feet, but we don't do the airport for 2 or 3 weeks, they have no access to.
I think that their point is that the airport snow clearing policy prioritizes which parts of the airport, and they think that road should be a higher priority.
Okay, so that would be up to council.
I think that's.
Yeah.
So this is interesting, and I think, you know, the bigger picture, which definitely includes council and vision for, I think is really, you know, that's over here, and I think it's a great exercise. I don't think they're willing to wait for us to do that big an exercise. So I think what I'd like to consider is to leave it with staff to go, okay, well, we've got a few things to play. There might be a few, we'll call them lower hanging fruit, like can we tackle the BC Hydro thing? The hydro, you know, maybe that's a short-term thing. So you know, or the snow clearing where it sits, you know, so those are some of the more day-to-day or the operational. Can we tackle some of those now? What is more, you know, appropriate in that user to staff meeting? What is more appropriate? And I got you, Laura. What is more appropriate in the big vision picture, and in what order do we do things? And I think like lots of good comments all the way around, and I think they should all be entertained. But I think maybe leaving it with staff to sort of sort through them and go, hey, we can talk about hydro over here, or we can't for the following weeks, you know, whatever staff comes up with, and break it down for us instead of trying to figure out the full plan right now. But I think lots of great input, and I think we can break it down a little bit better. Go ahead, Ryan.
Also, I'm not getting impatient. I just sometimes I'm like, I don't know if it's on me, so I'll just keep my hand up. But I think Mayor Richmond, maybe that's your comments about the timing is kind of saying, okay, like let's the things that we can deal with now with ideally without hopefully taking too much staff time, but maybe that could be something like I just remember referring back to priorities. It's saying, okay, kind of now things are that, you know, the right of way for potentially for the BC Hydro, the staff meeting, and then maybe we could think about adding it like the next or way down below is talking about a more formalized development and yeah, development strategy or something like that first.
I think it may be somewhere in the 107.
Yeah.
And if you guys to go, where does what fit in there? You know, like the big vision might not be for a year and a half, you know, I'm just throwing dates out. The hydro might be, yeah, we could tackle that. So I'd like to. just
Yeah, I think there's some
get-
low hanging fruit here that
Yeah.
can definitely be moved along, but in terms of a long-term strategy, I think that the EOCP engagement is going to be really important to sort of solidify next steps as to whether or not then there would be the need or desire on behalf of council to bring in a consultant that could help like cultivate further vision for the library.
When do you want to start with the village?
So many has good things going in the brain. Awesome, good conversation. I think staff's got lots of stuff to work with here. Thanks, everyone. And Thomas, you done yet or what? Let's go. How are you?
Okay,
Actually, you get this in bigger type.
I put it all on one page so that you have everything.
You can't read it.
We can't read it. Yeah, nice.
I'll walk you through the method, and some people around the table, it might be familiar. Somebody might see changes, and I think there's a couple of important points. But I'll get to that in a minute after. Running through the report, how much time do I have?
You have as much time as you need.
10 minutes.
Okay. Great, so shall I wait for the mayor? Today I want to walk through the draft 2023 capital budget. So as a reminder to everyone, big disclaimers, we're in the middle of year end. All of our results are unaudited and preliminary and subject to change, but I really want everyone's input today. And please provide review and comment along the way. So the idea is taking feedback, incorporating that into the capital plan and some of the items laid out, which staff have put together, and then coming back with a more polished draft at a future budget session. That's really the intention. We have a few more of those sessions coming up, and we are still looking for public input. I believe it's the 14th that we'll have a bit of a session for the public. We regularly check the budget at Pemberton email, and we haven't got any feedback from the community yet, just some junk mail. But we do look at that regularly. And yeah, this is the first session that we're reviewing capital in the budget process this year. Again, not all projects are necessarily captured, even over the last couple of days since we prepared the report. One of our new staff who's leading some of our operations provides some input, and we can chat about those changes today too. And of note, water and sewer capital projects are fully funded through user fees and reserves and do not have additional tax implications. Kind of standard disclaimers here. Today we're presenting this independent of the operations budget. So we're not talking about staff costs, or we're not talking about regular maintenance. We're talking about projects which meet the capitalization criteria and are of capital in nature. And funding is sourced through various there's various funding sources, whether it be grants or borrowing, surplus. Some projects are carried forward on the list. There's a variety of funding options, and we can fine tune those. Future discussions also will include the deployment of gas tax and the remaining COVID-19 funding. We haven't used all those funds up. In the report, I did provide just a handful of very important projects. They're in no way more important than any of the others or more impactful, but included those for the cover, but we can dive into everything that we're presenting in a moment. And also important to note, in a future session, we'll talk about the reserve assumptions that we're going to present and incorporate into the budget. We got some background last time from our consultants around some recommendations on increasing some of the investment in reserves to invest in the future health of the community. But again, that will be presented at a future session. And then, yeah, under the operational impacts of the report, I would just highlight that the village was all exposed to the impacts of COVID-19, the pandemic. We're fortunate to receive some funding, and there's some remaining funds there that have some restrictions that we'll dedicate and discuss at a future session. Outlined a bit of a schedule. That March 14th date, so when I love to plug and promote for community communications, and that's considered here as well. Now, I guess the really fun part that's maybe a change for those that saw this in past, I think a really important way to look at this is when we now look at the report that I presented to everyone. Staff's taking the time to incorporate a lens that has attempted to capture the community climate action plan. So I've gone through with our managers and tried to align where and how some of these initiatives line up with the community climate plans. I know that's a very important priority of the council. What we don't have is a corporate emissions plan, which is the next step in the recommendation of the climate action plan. But I've endeavored to address this general policy level document to a more practical lens in which we might be able to consider some of our projects as well. So that's the lay of the land before we go through the capital items. Does that make sense? Other questions?
So Thomas, is the goal, like, obviously the goal is to get some input on these capital projects from the committee. Where at the end of this session,
yes,
is the goal to go away with, okay, the following capital projects will now be included in the next version of the budget, or like what are your outcomes?
Yeah, that would be an ideal outcome if there's any steer about reprioritizing or reconsidering. I think you'll see we've got a large fleet component today to upgrade some of the existing equipment that supports a lot of our operations. If there's any direction or steer that way, that would be helpful. I think that there's a couple of items that might have moved in terms of priority or delivery from what the council might have seen last time. For instance, the delay of procuring a new snowplow and instead focusing on some alternatives that would better support hillside development growth and how we would clear snow and support services. There's a few strategic changes, and I think it will become more clear as we look through how all those capital items are laid out. But yeah, if there's anything that the council wants to support or help prioritize better or get something that I think they would hear, anything we've forgotten that you might suggest, that would be the type of feedback that I would.
But we're not like recognizing that we're obviously not looking at the whole budget. Personally, I'd go, put it all on that. I like them all. But we don't know what the cost implication would be at the bottom line of the budget. We haven't talked reserves, we haven't talked other funding. So again, is the expectation that that's something we go, no, that's really not a priority. So don't even put that on the list. But for the most part, recognizing that we're going to put things on there that some of which we might then have to remove.
That's right. And I think in future sessions, when we've got the full budget presented in its entirety, that would be where we may have more recommendations. But today, the intent is to familiarize council with what staff has presented and prioritized. Yeah. And the other caveat I would highlight, and I did address earlier, is there are multiple funding sources. We are awaiting some funding announcements and decisions and so forth. And that's a big impact on a few of the largest items presented here. And the announcement or the hopeful announcement of some of those would really solidify some of the priorities as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Everybody good?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So as we go through your capital expenditures, we can make comments and add questions and, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I've tried to incorporate here in the notes, a bit of feedback or detail as well, which might help clarify it or better highlight what these are. And again, if there's questions as to how climate action impact is kind of developed, we know that's an important consideration moving forward, but it is in the kind of elementary stages of finance department, working with development and managers and trying to understand how things align, but important nonetheless. Okay. So I'll just start by department. I have organized it by administrative department, the fire department, which has a separate fire committee which reviews this, development services, public works and parks. Then recreation, sewer, water, and airport. So those are the department level budgets we're gonna go through. So the administrative department, there's a handful of projects on that list. There's a bylaw truck, which was previously supported and approved, which has been delayed and scheduled to arrive within the next month. There's a priority. I should also highlight 5 years worth of the plan. We're developing a 5-year plan. There's ability to move some of these around. There's a placeholder for an e-charging station. There's a 2026 highlight for the municipal hall, which would coincide with a fire department placeholder, as you might see below, for 15 million. And that's the shared hall, which is currently in the development and space needs review right now. But there's a couple of very important service level reviews that demonstrated there's a shortfall in capacity in the community to service the growing demands of the fire department municipal hall services. There's a placeholder in 2025 for
I want to go through you as you.
Go ahead.
With the municipal hall and fire department, it's been on the books for a number of years. We're going to look at something last summer. We're going to look at something last fall. And then there was some indication we might be looking at something in February. Now it's moved ahead to 2026. When are we going to see some design or idea of it?
Well, I that isn't the design element there. Perhaps CAO Tracy can
Yeah.
talk about the current state of the project.
Okay.
Contracted architectural firm or the folks we've been working with on the program design are going to be coming into the last meeting in March.
And that'll be on municipal hall and the fire.
And fire.
Okay, so that'll be the end of March.
Yeah, they were supposed to come in February, but they were unavailable, so we had to issue that.
That's what I remember. In February was the original time, and I thought, gee.
Yeah.
Sliding.
It's coming, yeah.
Incoming. And if one more, the e-charging station in 2024. I look at that and then sorry to jump ahead of you, but I look at Public Works. And all of a sudden, over the next 5 years, we're looking at $900,000 for charging stations. 150 each year for the next year, each in the next 5 years for Public Works. And one next year for under administration. I'm having some problem with that $900,000 investment.
Could you help clarify or help me understand where the?
Well, I guess.
Or if I could clarify.
I see the expense, but I don't see any income. Okay, so in other words, we're putting out $900,000. I'm not going to supply free charging for people in the community. So I guess I'm trying to find, and it'll probably come in your budget. I mean, these are just straight expenses. I'm trying to say, how am I going to go to the public and say, well, yeah, you have to pay for gas, but if you got an electric car, go ahead. I need to understand that and where the income is going to come to pay for some of this.
The operations of.
I mean, I think there's a couple of ways to approach it. I think the Village of Hamilton has been very successful with grant funding to support the initiatives and the prioritization. But I think, as we look at, I believe the figures over 80% of emissions coming from transportation in the corridor and priority of the community climate action plan. This is one of the key pillars to achieving a lot of the progress in terms of the community climate initiatives and plan. I think though there may be, and the funding model continues to change in terms of the offset and revenue. I think the net benefit and the justification of these projects largely have been around the benefit of electrifying and improving emissions and climate action. I don't think I've observed a lot of examples where these things are have it immediately or a quick payback per se. I think as we look at the grant opportunities, we can better understand what those requirements might look like. But I think that strategically we've had this in place for some years, and before my time where it wasn't imperative that these were initially producing an income stream that would offset the expense.
Maybe I could just add to that too, and I see Tom's got some input. We said, I think it was last year, the year before, we said, put it on the 5 years or 10 year, like that we're gonna need to bring in chargers to the village to keep up with the electrification of our world, let alone our own fleet and that sort of thing. So we put it down there saying every year we're gonna need to have chargers if we're gonna keep up with the electrification of vehicles. And as we go through the process every year, we will continue to, and hopefully just as successfully, look for grants to offset that. So this isn't just coming out of our general budget. It's not $900,000 over 5 years. That's coming out of general government. It's or admin or public works. It's coming out of, we're saying this is what we'd like to see ourselves build as we move into the new world. And we will continue. And that's kind of ties back to my original question about, well, we're going to include all these things in here. Then we'll come back and talk about what funding we already have for some of them. And, we might have to defer. We might get 2 years of grant funding and then the third year go, okay, 150 this year, we didn't get grant funding. Let's push that 2 year ahead. But as we look ahead for 5 year plan, the idea is we're going to have to keep adding chargers as we grow and as more people come into our town and visit our town. We will have to keep adding chargers. Well, let's bookmark that cost and let's go after grant funding to hopefully pay for the vast majority of it. And then there is another conversation on the other side, as you brought up before, about how do we charge for it and how do we bring it back. So I think that's also, not a separate conversation, but also.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get to is. This is the expense side. And I guess we'll discuss that when we get the next step is where's the income side to kind of, I'm totally in favor of electrification. I'm not against it. But it's not going to be free to the public. Is what I'm saying. So there has to be an income side to it from my perspective. Thank you.
I was gonna add, I think you kind of touched on it, but clarification that in the administrative budget, that was for a potential electrification of our own fleet.
Yeah.
What was it?
The admin budget, that one would be for a charger to either have our own fleet or staff be able to charge. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that public works one would be.
So the first one here.
Yeah, and the first one's the chicken or the egg. We'll get to the egg later, whether the.
Change our vehicles to upgrade it. Okay.
Yeah, as I look at what's included in the electrify 4.1 section of the community climate action plan. There's progress as to how stakeholders transition fleets and commercial operations and trying to promote and be a part of that transition is what we're balancing the affordability and infrastructure needs with right now.
And I think that I was waiting to bring that part of it up to a little bit later, either today or next meeting. Because every time I see a new vehicle purchase, I think to myself, is today the day we draw the line? Is it tomorrow, is it next year where we stop buying fossil fuel vehicles and go to electrification? I think one of the steps for us to be able to draw that line is to have the infrastructure here in place to be able to plug them in and charge them. So I've been anxious, and since Tom's been here, I've been asking that question a little bit. When can we make that move, right? When can we start looking at true electrification of our fleet? And I think this is one of the first steps that we need through admin. How we fund it is still part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
we can unpack that a little more too when we get to some of our fleet questions. I think that's where some of our discussion will be today as well.
Yeah, and then some questions I'll have for.
Excellent. I think we did defer some website upgrades in the plan a little bit. We looked at staff priorities and balance that with how we can improve taxpayer and user experience with some of our services, as well as getting information out to public, and redevelopment is in there for 2025. And what we wouldn't have.
Yeah, I got a question on the website. Does that mean that, look to you, does that mean that our website is status quo till 2025, or is there room within the existing budget to keep tweaking in the meantime?
There's room to keep tweaking a little bit, but honestly, like the runway for an actual fulsome website revamp is going to need to be there in order to get us to the point we can actually deliver on it, because that in itself, when I look at this, is a huge scope of work that's going to be dependent on every single department to support. So yes, there'll be some minimal improvements we can continue to do to keep it functional for now, but in the end, we'll definitely be looking to potentially migrate to another product to support that, as well as just improving that user experience in general.
Thank you. Okay. Last up on the admin department allocations, daycare. Except upon receiving that grant, as everyone I believe is aware, and it's new since we looked at this capital plan last year. A lot of people are looking forward to that. Have increased capacity and service. Onto the fire department. If there's some more questions for admin. I would highlight that there will be a fire committee meeting where some of these items will be discussed as well. The village operates that service. Chief Adams establishes what needs are there, and will present a lot of this to the committee. There's an ongoing and routine project expense. There's a lot of routine items and upgrades, including hoses, nozzles, adapters, and gear. Those are covered in the first two items for $20,000 respectively. There's a little bit of work to complete the sprinkler protection unit truck and trailer project, which was funded through wildfire fighting operations. That's a skid unit purchase, which is slotted for, I believe, completion in the next quarter. The engine 10 replacement has quite a long lead for the chassis order versus the completion of the whole truck. If needed in our next session, Chief Adams and Chip could speak more to that, but we've highlighted that kind of long lead item there.
If I might, sorry, and Chief isn't here, but so we're looking at a $200,000 investment today for the initial order.
Yes.
With it being completed in 2 years, with the final price being another 450,000.
It would be since we last spoke, it's pushing 750. So the quotes have been, in my apologies, I have a couple of versions here that have been updated. So yeah, as I mentioned as a caveat at the beginning of this meeting, as we're continuing to receive quotes, numbers have moved around a little bit. This is one of the items where the most recent number that Chief Adamson said prepared this report and sent it through, and now is 150,000 for the chassis and 600,000 to complete the build.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, we can add another 100,000 to that 2026 or 2025.
That's right. I think the competitive procurement process is what would be ongoing, but as a placeholder, we would have this here, but by the time we finalize the budget, the quotes will have gone through and we'll have the most cost competitive option.
And there's no such thing as built, so that's guaranteed. It's just gonna change every year probably until we get it. Is that?
I expect once the contract is signed, we'd have secured price, yeah.
We would have once.
Yeah, I'd want to review the bids, but that would be my expectation.
And that would probably come with the $200,000 payment. That you've got.
Yeah, that would be my expectation.
Okay, thank you.
We've seen through long lead items, this is Stephen Morgan, we've seen some really unique circumstances. We've had lotteries to be considered to buy long lead equipment with $10,000 or $20,000 deposits. And that's for what, like 3 or 4 years out. Some equipment, we've seen suppliers really having negotiating power, and though we haven't seen it quite subside, what we'll get to next in the budget here is we have been able to defer a number of these apparatus and equipment for the reason that prices have come down a little bit in a few areas, but in not all cases. So again, the manager has been really trying to understand how it can be as cost competitive as possible. But over the last 3 or 4 years, we have seen a significant increase in pricing. So in forecasting a 5-year plan, it has been challenging to log anything in with obviously not putting deposits or orders in, but we have seen cost pressures, citing everything from steel to supply chain delays and so forth. So without the specifics of a few of the examples that we've reviewed, there have been a lot of challenges in trying to nail down these numbers. But yeah, that one will come with a more concrete quote by the next session. That also was seen as priority. Ladder 1 replacement was deferred from last year's plan to 25 to 26. Chief Adams has been looking at the class certifications and trying to optimize the plan for the apparatus replacement plan. Rescue 1 replacement. Again, Chief Adams was able to push that out by looking at the needs and the last line of that capital project. There's a rescue pump in place, and he's able to extend the useful life by upgrading to a lighter and more efficient and more reliable pump for the tools and extraction equipment. So my understanding is that buys a little bit of time while maintaining the service.
Sorry, I'm full of questions today. I'm wondering, for my personal benefit, with each of these departments, especially when some departments have reserves, I would love to have one more line added here that shows the reserves. So when I'm looking at, like for this year, if we got $315,000 for the fire department, what reserves do we have in place to help pay for that? So that I'm not thinking taxation kind of thing.
I think that's coming next session.
That's coming next. That's coming out of next session. Yes.
It's coming next section, but it would have been nice to have it here too, so I could have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a numbers guy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I appreciate your feedback and again,
It's coming next.
kind of the priorities has been trying to balance a lot of things as we spoke about earlier today as well.
I feel like you could stick $20 million on the fire hall. 20, look
No, it's
at
only 15.
yeah, looking at 2026. I had a couple of meetings at LGLA with a few folks who built fire halls recently. Cheapest one I heard was 17 million, and that was a year and a half ago. So
yeah, it's a challenge. And when you look at what's happening in the market, like the costs have been going up. We've got the got requirements for a post-disaster build here, and on a square footage basis, there's a premium to that. Looking at some of the step code adjustments and building a low carbon building, there's a cost to that also. But as CEO Tracy had indicated, we're getting a clearer picture of that from our architectural contractor that will, I think, provide council a better view of the work that's gone into space needs to fit the apparatus in the bay. There's certain requirements and space needs. This is all integrated into that plan, and I think that will be really clear in that presentation as well. Thank you. The last couple items there include the water tank and fire pump and the training ground upgrades there, which will allow for better use of the training grounds. creating a little bit safer, more stable surface out there, and will allow the chief to create a regional use of that space. We don't have any capital items for development services here, some larger contractors or major expenses which will come forward in an operations session. And as you know, the OCP and some large initiatives are underway.
Under development services, if I might. Maybe I'll leave that to in camps.
Go ahead. Great. Public Works and Parks. I'm very fortunate that our operations manager is here to fill in questions as well. I would say generally, maybe speak at a high level to what we've got here, and then we can go into some of the specific projects. Previously, a lot of the focus was around the Western Star replacement, the big pieces of equipment that brings the snow and serves a lot of our community. I think the team was really thoughtful in developing a plan where they consider some of the growth in the hillside developments and look at our fleet needs. So that's outlined in the plan here through some of the equipment additions. We can talk to those in detail in a moment. The amenity building, which is part of the soccer field, and the amenity building line item here. The actual building is slated to be built in RFP this year. That's one of the bigger line items.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
That was a grant that we received. So I guess my question is, soccer field's been built for a year and a half, so why would we still have 2.6 million in there when just doing the amenity building this year?
Would be the balance of the funding for the building. So first phases of that were the soccer fields, and the remaining balance would be the cost to complete the amenity building.
So the amenity building is going to cost us $2.6 million.
Approximately, and as I mentioned, unaudited early preliminary results are included here. So yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I think I need some help on that.
There was a $4 million grant, we spent 24 million. Soccer field, the remainder of the works will cost estimated 2.6 million, so just the buildings, parking lots, and servicing, water main out there, sewer force main, irrigation. So a lot of other elements to use the building, but yes, the remaining grant funding that we have, including our contribution, which I believe is partially gas taxes and a few other different areas, is 2.6.
Okay, and again, the reason I'm bringing it up, for the average person looking at this, and they know the soccer field is complete. Look at 2.6 million for an amenity building, they're gonna say, well, that seems out of whack, but is there potential at some point, like I've seen before in your presentations, you put stars beside things, and then underneath you can read what that means as far as costing, like Mr. Seaman just said. Like it's for irrigation and it's water and sewer and those, because the average person, I mean, I'm not gonna approve the 2.6 million amenity building, but with all the other servicing that's required, I understand that, but the average person's not.
Yeah, I think so we've got this preliminary draft here with the notes and the idea is by creating more depth and visibility, which we'll have available for our public information section, something that wasn't necessarily quite as robust as in the past. We do have budget descriptions to really highlight the depth of the projects and the real justification of where this investment sits. So I think candidly, I looked at Whistler's report, they did a great job. I want to get this there for our public session, and we're halfway there for discussion today, but we will have some justification of the project descriptions that does provide that visibility to the public.
Yes, and that's really what I wanted to get to, because a lot of men don't understand financing, so I want to make sure they understand. Thank you very much.
Councilor Robinson.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify the process today. So my understanding is we're just looking at this in this basically a draft of kind of, this is currently what we're thinking, we're providing a comment, like feedback, but we're not we're not approving this today. So like in terms of getting more details, so with serves or, you know, looking at the amenity building and saying, okay, this is what the 2.6 is going to, that'll be details and information and potential approval that happens later down the road.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
in some cases, like, you know, that project will have been approved in this carryover.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think, for example, Councillor Craddock's input about providing better visibility for the public around, you know, some of these clarifying points, that it's excellent feedback. We can incorporate that to make this a more robust and transparent process. And this is my first pass at it in, you know, completely holding the reins, my second crack at it this year. And I think that, you know, staff is very excited to produce visibility to get that and stuff too. So we're trying to improve our bottoms up budget process and add some visibility around our capital projects.
And to your point, we're not approving anything today. I mean, if there was something that we all went, hey, well, why isn't this on the list somewhere?
yeah.
Then something we can add to the list, or we have no interest in that project being on the 5-year plan, let's remove it entirely. But to your point, at the end of it, or the next step of the process, we'll be able to look at these capital projects in the light of operational increases or budget, in the light of reserve aspirations, and then put it all together. And that's why I said earlier, chances are we might end up pulling or pushing, not pulling them off, but pushing some of these down the road to get where we need to get.
And from a procedural standpoint too, it's the first time that staff and council have a time to interact and discuss or have visibility on this. So staff, department managers and their teams put these forward and wanted to introduce them and socialize them with mayor council. And you know, I think this is that opportunity to take all that discussion, make sure everyone's aware and understanding where things have shifted from last year's view of the 5-year plan, and incorporate that into our benefits.
One other thing, I forgot to mention there's EV chargers in that.
In the what, sir?
In the construction of the amenity building, we'll include EV chargers. And also similar to a lot of the grants we have, for example, Park and Ride or the multimodal transportation hub. You could say, well, why are we spending $1.8 million on a parking lot? But there is obviously a lot more in the scope of the project, but you can only fit so much into it. Also in here.
But for the public, we want to have that extension there.
Yeah,
So
Sure,
they,
yeah.
so they understand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
thank you.
thought I would just add the EV charger element, because I know this,
$150,000
they are minimum that, yeah.
minimum now.
To be a little context, I went to Whistler's open house and I saw that they had $15,000 per charger, and I had inquired with staff. I said, how are you guys doing this? What's the secret? And they followed back up. I think they said, yeah, there's about 150,000 a piece of the time.
Missing a zero. Come on, you smell about publicly? Hey.
So we, I think we're pretty competitive with what we're doing. Again, the grant funding is in the corridor here. Excellent. Tom did touch on the next big one on the list, the Park and Ride. Again, we're successful in the grant funding and implementation beginning this year.
And what the 200,000, like what's the start of that? What will we see? What will the public see, I suppose?
We're currently working on designs. We were hoping to construct this year, but there's been quite a few design elements that have been in flux, let's say, for various reasons, access to the lot, Ministry of Transportation consultations, French school consultations. There's been quite a few pieces that have been discussed, and obviously we've got an opportunity to develop this lot. Then a lot of things come in, like, oh, we should include a sandy dump for a visitor center, things like this, that I don't feel that the design will progress to the point that we'll be able to construct this year, considering all these new elements that have been considered. So in terms of what the public will see, I don't believe we had any public consultation plan for this. I mean, we have a very specific scope of what this work is. So, I mean, I suppose we could bring it to council once we have a design, just for input if there's anything else, but, I guess the project to me was fairly straightforward and now it's becoming more complex. So perhaps, bringing it to council just to have a look at it once we do have something, it would be worthwhile, and then the public would there and have an opportunity to see it, but we're not finding a consultation on how that will be.
I think just a point was brought up by someone earlier today about the sandy dump and the visitor center and that's gonna change and maybe that will impact. Who knows, right? Yeah, that multimodal transport project.
If I may, I realize I missed this comment, so Colin Brown is now sitting on the Pemberton Area Economic Collaborative for the Village of Pemberton. I forgot to mention this, so he flagged that point and is following up with I believe is following up with the Chamber of Commerce, because he realized that would be, it's applicable to the official community plan. So there is, I believe that's on his radar as well. It's like that.
So overall, to answer your question, we're hoping to design it at the least this year, but there may be some funds of this clearing. Reloading or something like that, but we'll design it.
Move on to the next page.
It seemed very small compared to these large numbers on here, but just in our conversation earlier today about opening up a conversation around the value of the Great Lawn and maybe enhancing it in a lot of ways. And I'm just wondering where things like budget for all the trees potentially that could be planted, where does that fit into any of that? Or is
There's a few ways we can look at it, and the original scope, again, where we can incorporate feedback. Original scope of the project had a defined plan and consultants on that. Oftentimes when we supplement or grow something supposed to be successful in receiving grants, it's like the trees, change orders and some pressures like the daycare project. Would show up in an increase of the session a month ago around some approvals on what potential funding would look like if the project scope grew, but as it's defined here, this doesn't include a increased scope, but before we finalize this year's budget, we would best sort of flat what any pressures may look like.
Right. It's
And any other funding supplements that we might receive from the province or otherwise.
There's a couple of regular tree type grant funding, like BC Hydro, which you Canada, whatever they're called, they come up semi-regularly and staff's always on alert for when they come up and where we can best use it.
So there works building improvement and roof repair. So there's nothing right now. We don't have anything allocated. Okay.
I did these and I decided, in some cases, I decided these might be completed or removed.
Those are well completed.
Those were
okay.
completed. Bit of the where we were to how we're going, and I can find you the final draft, but when we were looking at it, you were kind of looking at stuff that is.
Yeah.
And my last comment, I've been in the works building now, thank goodness, at the beginning of our tour that we did, and the works building improvement and the works building roof repair, and there's nothing budgeted for that building for at all, ever.
The roof.
Are you gonna survive?
The roof was done last year.
It was done last year?
The roof was.
Okay.
Wasn't last year?
Yes. Well, I think the potential plan is that there's a new fire hall. It's my thinking to inherit that.
Because I'm just noticing that the works building is.
I think as we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of capacity constraints around the organization, and that's part of that broader strategy to help address that.
And I've been trying to include whatever pairs and projects into it, so it's not capital projects, because it would be large capital projects. A building is.
You're band-aiding is what you're doing, yeah.
They're laying on Band-Aids, doing a great job of it to try to keep it going until we have a new home is basically what it comes down to.
And in many cases around our entire capital and operating budget, the closer to end of life or end of use some of our assets reach. It's often the case that we're starting to see considerably higher maintenance expenses. So, investing in more efficient or more reliable equipment or assets often it's not lower operating expense. So we're making those trade-offs when we look at the business cases. Okay, on to the next page. The Friendship Trail Pemberton Farm Road East is, I think, something the council will have been familiar with that. It's slotted for 2023. I think there's next up a little bit of an opportunity to look at supporting some of our equipment in a loader placeholder for a snow blower there. And then I think the next big one, which you may want to speak to, Mr. Chairman, is just around the boardwalk replacement. That often gets a lot of questions from council in the past, and I think highlighted what's involved with that one for just over $1 million.
Well, we've gotten a couple quotes on full replacement boardwalk. Looking at a better structural construction of it, because basically what happens is those piles are just driven into the mud of the lake and these thaw just causes, I'm sure, the boardwalk's a roller coaster. And we pound those down every year, but we look at new design like helix piles that screw into the ground, more stable. So it is quite substantial, obviously, the cost to replace the entire boardwalk. And then we also have plans to widen it to be more user-friendly, multi-directional. People with strollers and bikes and trailers and things, it's pretty tight. And then also widen the trail around the lake all the way around. So even the sections that aren't boardwalks. So it's substantial. We've applied for the works with it because it's works within a stream or a waterway. So it's quite a substantial environmental approval required as well. We applied for over a year ago. They say it's 18 to 24 months processing time on those. So that's the lead time there. That's it.
What's the, do you have any idea what the life of the boardwalk is now?
What the life of it is.
Like, are you concerned for people's safety, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not gonna collapse.
I'm not so worried about, I'm thinking about people's safety, yes. I think it's a absolute priority. We again are fixing broken boards all the time. We're repairing it. It's not gonna collapse and cause catastrophic harm or anything like that. It's but it's certainly rickety and I don't think it's the safest, but I don't think it's to the point that I would close it to the public. In fact, even if we did, people would still use it. So we're just doing our best to maintain it as needed. But there's a lot of inherent risks with people on the boardwalk anyway. Kids go on their bikes and if they fall into the water, it's somewhat risky. But yeah, that's there, whether it's for any boardwalk or not.
And one of the things Tom's and his team have been looking at is it a full replacement or are there areas we can avoid some of the boardwalk and push it onto the shore? And so I think there's a lot of.
To be honest, I would love to remove the boardwalk completely. I think just from a maintenance review, I enjoy using the boardwalk as a user and I appreciate how important it is to the public. But anything that could be just a land-based trail would be, in my opinion, more suitable. And it would be way less maintenance because we spend a lot of time out there every year and money. So I think part of this plan would be to look at anywhere that Harrison said anywhere that there's potential to remove the boardwalk and put it on land, and then still have some pieces of the boardwalk, but remove as much wood as possible. The wood does not do well. Yeah.
Like you put a lot of creosote on it, then you're all good.
Well, yeah.
Right on. Great.
Next up, we've got some of the equipment showing up, and there's a prioritizing in tier approach to the way that this is presented. I'll just start with the bucket truck replacement. The old one reached end of life and was retired due to safety concerns, and that's the truck that puts up street lamps and some really critical safety infrastructure. So the proposal there is to replace that with a used piece of equipment that are very expensive or hard to find. And I think the team's sourced a couple of good options.
If I may, I think the previous council, I think I showed pictures of this truck before, the rot in it, that no longer is with us. It's we no longer have a bucket lift vehicle. We're no longer able to repair streetlights until we get some.
Will be able to save the lift itself, or is that in the same chain?
We managed to sell what was the trading of it for actually more than.
Okay.
In all, there are some of these between 23, 24, and 25. In 23, the recommendation would be to prioritize the F550 with plow and sander. That would serve some of this the snow, and from the experience with one of the most recent purchases, does really well in some of the hillside developments and supports operations quite well. The garbage truck, the 8-foot bed F-150 that council might often see driving around is reaching end of life, and it's seeing some pretty significant maintenance bills. And as you see a piece of vehicle or a piece of equipment aging, as you may appreciate, the emissions aren't as great. This is a new option. There is reliable, and that would be a great addition to the fleet.
Can I just, through the mayor, on the garbage truck, one thing I noticed that maybe is a bit of a concern for WCB is people picking up those bags that are full and trying to throw them in the back of the truck. So can we look at a truck where there's a step at the back that they can step into it rather than throw on the sides?
Sure.
I've seen some cases where people have struggled, especially when there's half a bag full of dog leftovers.
I thought you were gonna say especially when they're 5 foot tall. Which is that's a lot of staff on my workers.
I think safety wise, it might be
Absolutely.
an idea. Thank you.
Could I just comment on these vehicle ones? Because I think Mr. Secretary alluded to it, but we talked about at the start, we had actually budgeted for last year for the purchase of the new plow truck, which would be our premier snow clearing vehicle. We talked about the supply chain challenges. We've tried to put an order in for that, and that was what Mr. Score mentioned. There's a lottery to be able to put an order in, so you have to win the lottery to get the chance to order one for cars to be built. When we learned that, we sort of revisited our needs for equipment. Obviously, as I presented to the previous council, when we budgeted for this is to replace our sort of prime snow equipment. So we looked at it, and with the newest purchase of the 450 truck last year, it was a first truck in the summer, and then we put a plow in the winter. It's been quite useful, especially on our newer roads at the hillside that council was talking about. So we thought, okay, well, what if we get another one of those? And that's what the 550 plow and sander is. That can take care of a lot of the side streets and whatnot. And then we also looked at an option of getting a wing for the loader. That's one of the main things that the plow does really well, is it has this large plow up front, but a wing to sort of widen out any roads and essentially use our loader, which is, as previous council also remembers, is a fairly new piece of equipment, utilize that even more and its versatility. So between those two pieces of equipment, kind of doing what the plow truck was intended to do. But on the positive side, the truck, the 550 truck could then be used as an additional parks truck in the summer, which we had originally had in the budget as well. So it was kind of a way we didn't have a choice, knowing that we don't have a dump truck coming anytime soon. But I feel like it's a very interesting way to look at it and come up with a solution. So that's where this came from. And then the thought process being that we had $300,000 budgeted for a plow truck that we haven't spent. So we got $300,000 that we can spend on smaller pieces of equipment that are more versatile, combined can accomplish the same, if not more. That was the approach here. Just wanted to get a little bit of that color.
And then just to put a smile on everybody's face under electrified hand tool equipment, that 10,000, that's just for extension cords, I imagine. Are we changing over a lot of the equipment, like the
Well, that would be
lawnmowers and blowers?
that would be mainly like the blowers, the two-stroke engine stuff, you know, chainsaws, hand tools, trimmers, things like that we currently have gas-powered engines. Just again, to help satisfy the electrification goal. We don't have that corporate emissions plan, but
yeah.
And also there is some funding available through technology. I can't remember what that was called, but we have some money coming in for the purpose of improving your emissions, corporate emissions. So we thought we were going to use some of that towards.
As we looked at this whole fleet and you'll see in 24, there's a couple more replacements with the trade-in value and kind of replacement for both the 550 flat deck and the Kubota.
Is that a new one or an upgrade? Like we got one.
That would be a trade-in of yours would be
What was that one already?
2013.
As we look at all these, Tom's team and ourselves, we've all explored a lot of the grant opportunities, and fortunately, a lot of the fleet and commercial equipment that we need and we have a demand for isn't yet available or qualifying for either rebates or funding. So that's something we'll continue to monitor and ensure we're on top of the pursuing these opportunities. And it's such an interesting job to where you got to look at other communities and see how they're funding and supporting the affordability piece through these grant supplements, but the similar or substantially similar equipment isn't yet available. So we'll continue to be on top of that as we're looking through purchases. But that's something that is top of mind, and I've highlighted that when we're looking at our electrification strategy to see where we can replace it. So that's part of next year when we're having this discussion. We might be looking at electrified pickup trucks as an example, that we've tried to tier this replacement so that we're meeting immediate needs, but not needing everything to be due at exactly the same time.
So, go ahead. No, you go.
I was just gonna say, and unfortunately, the bottom line is for an electric pickup truck, it's gonna be 3 times more expensive. And I'd rather like my equipment needs right now such that I can't. See, I need 3 trucks and not 1. And I can't, like, we got trucks that are literally breaking down and, you know, having exhaust leaks that are safety concerns for that. And, you know, we have staff using personal vehicles, and it's the state that we kind of need to just get our fleet at least operational. And then we're eager to get electrified as well, but it's just the budget constraints as well as such a challenge.
And I just wanted to thank Tom for this innovative approach to solving this for us as an organization, because right now we truly are in that bridging state to get to this point where we can have a greener fleet. But for right now, I think this is a step in the right direction, because we're getting tools that we actually may be more effectively able to use than the ones that we had already. They're going to be safer. The fuel economy is going to be better because they're going to be newer. And hopefully that'll help carry us through to this next phase where we see the integrity of the actual availability of electric vehicles increase. Because examples, there are some things that are out there now, but as far as what we need is an organization to get out of those vehicles, they're not going to deliver that at this point, but it gives us that runway for the technology to improve and be more in line with what we're going to be needing in the future.
If I might ask, what's the availability of this equipment? Because I know.
Well, that's gonna be a challenge as well. Some of these, we're looking at used options, which has some cost savings as well, and that's what the last couple of trucks that we've got. A lot of municipalities will just lease these types of vehicles, and after a couple of years, they'll get a new one, or we've looked at that option as well, if the availability is not there, and it's comparable in terms of the spending versus borrowing and, you know, rates. So we've done that for a couple of our vehicles in our fleet. So I think to answer your question, that there's much more availability than something specialized as. The attachment motor, we've got a price for that's available. And then, you know, 550 is a much more on the available truck to get, so that was part of the approach.
So Thomas, when you plug these capital purchases into the next budget iteration and bring it back, what numbers do you use in terms of borrowing, short-term lease rates? Like how are, you know, when you look at, I'll just pick a number, $100,000 vehicle or $50,000 vehicle, and you put that in the budget. The numbers we're looking at, is that going to show X amount down and a attached loan, or you should like, how do you do that?
Typical for a vehicle, we would have our MFA rates, so plug it into the rates which the municipality would have as a preferred borrowing rate, and typically I would expect we'll have a 5-year borrowing duration here, and we would have a principal and interest expense which would be reflected in the budget. So
based mostly on a 5-year.
That would be typical for something of this nature. I'll bring those numbers.
I just get it, because there are a couple options. I think
Yeah.
you de-lease and then buy that one, or.
Perhaps, you know, in the event that we want to promote a reserves utilization, which I haven't decided what % yet. As I said, that will come at a future iteration, but if that were the case, we would see the outlay up front. But kind of there's a balanced approach here, as you know. Interest rates aren't where they were last year, but and we, as we talked about last session, also have limited borrowing capacity, and then we have some larger items down the road. You know, the importance of grants and balancing all of those sources is really important. The other consideration, if you look at some of these, is we have different funding sources, through partners, by different partners that we need to sit down and review these with as well. So.
Thanks.
Recreation was. Let's keep recreation. I will highlight perhaps one real quickly on recreation though that might be applicable. We've got a new public works staff member that's got some expertise around managing turf and facilities, and we see the electric mower option there. We'll bring back to council a revised proposal, which will also hit the PUS team, or how we already started that week. We've got some recommendations on a better service that around to what we originally had in here.
We wanted to present more of a 5-year plan for the equipment needs of the recreation, the Dundalk Park. But this is one more, but we would like to put in some more in the future.
If I might ask, with the electric mower, are there other attachments or things we can add to it? We'll do other things like a blower for the parking lot or stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's what I'm referring to in the notes there, you know, like aerator, top dresser, seeder, things like that. We're trying to decide what the best approach would be. We do have a mower that we exclusively use out there. We wanted to get a mower that we could attach a plow or snow blower on to do the clearing of the trails out there, since getting our equipment from town to that area and including up to some snow and everything, it's more difficult. So, but now we're sort of getting some other ideas, like maybe a small side by side instead that you can put a plow on, and that can be used for maintenance of fields and can all the equipment that you need for the field maintenance. So yeah, that we're going to provide a more comprehensive list of things in 5 years. But great, that's kind of what we wanted to start with. One sort of big item, and that was to include the snow blower attachment and a couple others that I mentioned.
Conscious of Mr. Chima's time, I'll just quickly hit on those points so we can keep moving to the last page. There's a routine replacement of fitness equipment in that service. Including the basketball, part of the net in so far.
I see they're up now.
Yeah, so that's a 2023 completion. There's a proposed accessibility improvement to decrease steps and the ramp. The working with library and supporting that project, as well as installing some soccer nets. And since I prepared the presentation we have, this Burns is also highlighted there may be a need for some sound system equipment, which will be close as well. That was we are $20,000. So then the last page here will cover off both sewer and water projects. Perhaps you could briefly talk on a couple of these items during that last page.
Sure. We've got a number of little SCADA projects happening this year. And in discussion with Mr. Zakor, we kind of figured that we're going to be needing work on our SCADA system for the next couple of years. Starting to clarify, SCADA is supervisory control and data acquisition for our facilities like water and sewer treatment. So we've upgraded our system. We connected extra areas, new developments. Next step is going to some of our remote locations and getting communications there so that they can communicate back to our spaces. So there's just an ongoing lots of smaller projects that kind of fit into this one. The next one is the Fernwood water main and PRV replacement. So we did complete the preliminary design for that project. My suggestion was that we phase this so that we just do the PRV replacement as a pressure reducing valve. That's on the hillside here. Another option we could have is look at that as a development contribution, but it might be a hard one to justify waiting for. Yeah.
Can we get late comers on that maybe?
I don't think so, no.
Always looking for a way.
Leak detection, I think even for the new council, you've heard me talk a lot about water conservation. And so that's part of that, to get a device that would help us identify leaks through our systems. Which I do think is a priority. That was actually carried forward from last year. We will do some research on some products, but they're only in the United States and can really get references from other municipalities in Canada. So we try to just put out there. We completed a couple of those projects, listed commercial meters. So this is another one that I've added this year. Part of that water conservation approach that we've sort of identified 9, well, actually, I think it's 8 locations and 1 spare for potentially heavy commercial users that aren't metered right now, just to help us identify, bill those users appropriately, not just based on quarterly billing, but based on usage, and also to help with our leak detection and understanding of where the water is being used. We have in here a test well exploration. I think I've mentioned before about our current supply, and we're looking at treatment for iron and manganese of our existing source, and that would also help with potential future source being in the Little River Aquifer. So this would be to do some exploration just for future planning of where might there be a good secondary source, assuming that we have treatment for those things. Then we could start exploring another source. So that's just something that I think we should get moving on before it becomes.
And just as we move off this, and I know you're gonna answer me the same way you have for the last number of years. I still would like to see us consider surface water. Like from Pemberton Creek, and I know it comes into, well, you hate to mix the two. But with the new water treatment plant, is there any way we can?
It's not about mixing those, it's just feasibility. We've done feasibility studies on it and multiple experts have recommended. There would be some options, but we're talking tens of millions of dollars for the treatment that would be required for surface water source. So Pemberton Creek, we have a license to track. There's been some studies on the turbidity and also the fluctuations in supply of yield. It's not great. One thing that we have been looking at is like they have what's called an infiltration gallery, which is almost a mix between a well and surface water. You drill in the side of the river and extract from that. And you get the natural filtration through the rock like you would in a well, but that was something I was considering budgeting for, was doing a little bit of exploration into an infiltration gallery, but surface water, I mean, if we want to pay another consultant to tell us not to do it, it's kind of been. We've had multiple people tell us that it's not a good idea.
Just, I looked at the quality of the water we're getting right now compared to Pemberton Creek. I would take a cup of water out of Pemberton Creek, but I wouldn't out of some of the well water we get before treating. I
I don't know how to answer that, sorry.
Yeah. And I'm still living.
But somebody who's done work in environmental monitoring and surfacing stuff, I mean, it looks, it can look clean or anything like that, but it's just like the level of variability, it's open to the atmosphere, so like there's just, there's so much that can go in, and there's such a high degree of fluctuation, and that's also, I know, a really difficult thing to like in terms of treating your water. If you have a consistent source that you know like roughly what issues are, you can plan for that. But if it's something that's fluctuating on a daily basis and it's a large degree of fluctuation, it can be incredibly difficult.
The next item on the list is the water treatment facility, which council is aware of. We applied for a grant and we're hopeful to hear about that soon. So again, this is assuming that we have funds provided through a grant that we would do this, but if that looks like a big price tag, then surface water treatment is about 5 times that for what you would need. This is just for filtering. We've had this item, water feasibility and water source study, in the 5-year plan for a couple of years. I think it's just a placeholder for doing more exploration into the options. Whether it's another groundwater source, water, so it's just to come forward. As well as the industrial park looping, which would take our water in the industrial park instead of being supplied by the Water Nation, we could be getting our own source out there. Now, with that, there are potentially some of these new sources and treatment facilities, because we don't really have capacity to put that on.
So if I might ask with that, then we're working on access to putting a new 300-meter line in over privately owned property. Where is that budgeted in? And
that's the next line item of Crater Road water main upside.
Well, that's where that comes in.
It's a 300 millimeter. So that's the water main is supplied to Crater Road. I think we've earmarked some gas tax towards that.
So over a 3-year period, that's almost $900,000.
Well, portion that you're referring to over private property is $270,000.
That's it alone, okay, and then.
The next portion will be under the highway, and then the next portion will be on.
So the plan, according to this, is we hope to go ahead with that 300mm line this year. That's the whole.
That's what I'm told.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
That's water.
Thank you. Now we got a place to put it.
Yeah, you want to just keep going? Sure. So again, skated upgrades similar. We have a little bit more on the front end. I thought Thomas, we did the different here for sewer, but basically we broke up 100,000 into 4 years, including last year. But sewer has more in this year. I think that for water, we're going to distribute it more evenly. Sewer, we had a few more upfront costs because I think I mentioned the communications piece of those stations, but I'll look at that again. Outfall inline flushing system. I don't want to go too much into history class here, but essentially because of the Capricorn Creek landslide, we're seeing a lot of sediment coming down the river. I think council's aware of this. That sediment is causing operational challenges with our sewage plant outfall in Little River. So this was just a recommended item from a study that we did on how to prevent that, where we'll have some inland flushing to keep that flow to prevent it from backing up. So that project's actually underway right now. It was carried forward from last year, and we're working on it. Variable frequency drives debated whether or not this was a capital item, although the plant was built in 2004, and these are some original parts from the plant. So a straight replacement is not really possible. The technology's changed, so it's sort of an upgrade, but it's also sort of a maintenance item. But it is fairly large cost. There's 3 of them that all need to be done. So that's why we put it into capital. Industrial park generator was a carry forward. We did get a couple of prices, unfortunately, just the work capacity to get this project done this year. But we would like to go ahead with that one. Currently, the industrial park doesn't have any backup standby power. So and with the amount that's been built out in the industrial park, we don't have as much cities full. Continuously operating their power.
Where would that go?
Where would it go?
Yeah,
Beside the lift station.
over beside the lift station.
It'd be on the pad. Yeah, they've already stick here there actually, so it's
It'll go right on.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We pushed back the inflow and filtration study. Although I do think this is really important, I just looking at this list, I don't think we're gonna get that done this year, so. Walnut lift station design was complete, well, preliminary design is complete. Next step would be the upgrade. So this one's tricky, it's come to be a lot more expensive than we anticipated. We're gonna need to upsize the entire fourth main leading to this lift station and probably relocate it. There is a few developments going in this area that we've proposed that would contribute. Of course, those developments are in their early stages, so it's not known if they will come in, given the price tag of what they would have to contribute to do this. But essentially, this would be our share of the construction, which would cover the existing homes that are tying into it. So the project as a whole is 1.4 million, and the 556,000 would be it was about 40% share that made up the existing homes on that system, and then the developers would cover the rest under that assumption. We're gonna have to wait and see what the developers come back with, but we've given them notice that this is going to be a requirement of each of their developments. So I don't know if that project would go ahead otherwise, but it's sort of has to. Regardless of these developments going in, just given the amount of maintenance work that we have to do, and it's already your capacity. So it's a tricky one. We're hopeful that developers do. And then let's say in one, we bumped back a couple of years because we've been looking at a couple other alternatives to improve that without a full upgrade, just given the costs that we're finding the Walnut Lift Station upgrade to do. Lastly, we have a UV system upgrade similar to the variable frequency drives at the wastewater treatment plant. This is just a BV system, these upgraded. Sorry.
Sorry.
That's all.
Thank you. Last two really quickly, in the airport, yeah, it's ongoing routine cycle of maintenance, the tarmac will require some sealing, crack servicing work, so that may be potentially grant funded, has been part of the past.
Yeah.
And then lastly, as we've heard about not long ago, there's some fencing requirements and some capital work that was flagged for 2025. Top of that,
If I can just speak to that, when we did the track ceiling repairs in 2016, the total amount was $75,000, of which the village contributed 25% as part of the grant program. At that time, the cracks were quite significant because there were no work done. So I'm kind of hoping that if we stay on top of it and do it every 5 to 6 years, we won't be so far behind. We have budgeted $100,000 because cost of asphalt and everything has gone up. But that would be a grant application that we make in November, December of 2023. And we would find out in January, February 2024 if we get the money. So we would have to look at budgeting what our portion would be as part of that grant. And also with respect to the fencing, one of the things that the airport user group has requested is a fence a gate similar to what the fire department has at the training base. That's about a $25,000 to $30,000 gate. So what we would look at doing is seeing if we can facilitate. There is some fencing repairs that need to be done just generally. And so we would look at what that might look like. We're going to get quotes this year for all of that with the idea that we would apply for the air access funding. And depending on whether we can apply for both, we will. But if we can't, then we would afford that crack ceiling repairs first. And probably some line painting as well.
I certainly see people struggling to open that gate out there on the.
Yeah, we've repaired it a number of times. It keeps getting broken. There's a lot of people that have a key to that gate, and I don't know how. There's a lot of people. Yeah, a lot of sometimes.
Oh, is it right?
Okay. Yeah, for each aircraft, I think there's 2 or 3 keys out. Yes.
So that's
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Sheila. Great. Thanks for everyone's feedback. I guess my recommendation is if there's any further direction from the committee, well, please provide that and incorporate that into the next draft. Try to make sure we had everything really discussed and thoroughly reviewed before bringing it forward. I think especially after seeing Mr. Chino's presentation where he has the lion's share of the budget. Hopefully see the link between our priorities and community needs as well.
Do you need a motion to include these items in the next regional budget, or is it just a natural process?
I think it's a process that we can work with them.
Any last comments? Thomas, I think it's pretty obvious today how much you have to do with a lot of big stuff that's going on right now, like not just the budget and a lot of side stuff. I think you're doing a really great job holding it all together, and when you're presenting the budget this year is top shelf. So
thank you.
I know you're anxious for this part of the process to be over, but kudos, man, great job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Maybe we can put in for a photocopy to expand.
Paper.
That'd be cheaper, yeah. I can get those rules.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so that. Go here. Well, that concludes budget session, so I'll look for a motion to adjourn committee of the whole. Moved by Councilor Scott, seconded by Councilor Nightingale. Any opposed, the motion carries. We need to reopen the open and camera. Do we need to pause or we get to roll through here on hour 7?
Just a sec, Will. We'll stop the
Laura close, she has to stay.
Can you just call the adjournment of the regular meeting?
Adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, wow.